All right, guys. So before we get into the obvious Black Mages review, which I am not so obviously not a part of, we did beat Final Fantasy Explorers this week. We just finished it. It's 2:57 a.m. Monday morning, August 12th. We're done. Guys, get us your reviews. Get us your questions of the game. You can tweet us. You can put them on the forums. I'll have little links up there. Let us know what you thought of this game. We're going to have the review soon, the next time we have a day off or time to record it. But I want to get this out for you guys now. Please go to ultimatefinalfantasy.com, click on the forums, give us your thoughts, give us your questions on Final Fantasy Explorers, and we will answer them. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm the lead singer for Lipstick Generation.
And I'm Steve. I'm the not doing my homeworker from Lipstick Generation.
And welcome to the Lipstick Panel. Today on the Lipstick Panel, we are talking about an album that Steve has a ton of opinions on and is really going to contribute to the conversation with.
Yep.
We are talking about the debut album by the Black Mages. Because Steve and I were talking, and he said, I don't want to do any more JRPG soundtracks, Greg. Nope. I don't care for those. And then I was saying, well, would you want to do like a heavy metal JRPG cover album? And you're like, yeah, that sounds cool. I would probably enjoy that. And so that's why we decided to do this episode, and Steve did not notice the difference between the songs.
Nope.
But we have some guests that might notice the difference between the songs. We've got, returning to the program, Mr. Victor Krause, a amazing neo alt-rock musician, and not just neo in like the Matrix sense, but like, you know, in like a new pushing the genre forward sense. Welcome back to the show, Victor.
Hey, I'm back, but also in the Matrix sense.
But also in the Matrix sense, like both. We've got
you know, if more musicians were like Neo, then Dimebag would still be with us. R.I.P. in peace.
Whoa.
That was in really poor taste.
What? Too soon? It's been like a decade. It's fine. Should I have gone with Kurt?
Yeah, because at least that was like self-inflicted. But
was it though? Where's Steve Edwards to defend Courtney Love?
It wasn't in the heart.
Speaking of transitions, hey, who's that over there? Oh, it's someone's first appearance on the Lipstick Panel. We've got Andrew from Amusement Sparks, a podcast that I've been on before. Welcome to my show this time. Welcome, Andrew.
It's a nice place you got here. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, it's very, very comfortable on the Skype couch. Hey, wait, I see someone creeping out of the shadows. Oh, look, it's Joseph DeGolier from
I thought I hid him under the cushions. No.
It's Joseph DeGolier from Ultima Final Fantasy and the Godzilla podcast, and formerly of Nude Clan and Super Sexy Swingin' Fan Fiction and all the podcasts, all 500 of them.
Oh, God. Just mention the first two. We don't need to talk about the others.
You mean your magnum opus of podcasting, Super Sexy Swingin' Fan Fiction?
Yeah. Let's forget that one ever existed. I am in a bunk right now, so you were right about the shadows. I couldn't be more hidden away in my apartment than I am now. I got a little curtain over me, literally crouched in the shadows on this Skype call with my headphones on, and I'm ready.
Somebody's like walking through your house being like, where's that voice coming from?
They know. They were warned. Black Mages. Let's get into this. I've listened to this music, a lot of this music, for a very long time, so it's interesting to come back and revisit. But yeah, Final Fantasy, man. It's great. Great stuff. Nobuo Uematsu, kicking ass. I got one question for you before we start. Does anybody know anything about the production of this album, and was any of the bass guitar stuff real?
So I do know a little bit about the production of the album. I believe the bass was played by Tsuyoshi Sakito, who also played guitar on the album and did a lot of the sequencing. I want to go around the panel and talk about everyone's history with this album in particular, and I guess Final Fantasy, if you want to get into that. But Joe, since you already started, I want to go with you first. So what's your history with, I guess, the music of Final Fantasy and this album in particular, however you want to take it?
The music of Final Fantasy. Well, I've been a Final Fantasy fan since, I don't know, junior high. So what? 9th grade area, kind of around there. Borrowed Final Fantasy VIII off a friend, and although I don't really care for the music of Final Fantasy VIII, the other games in the series have great scores. And so I just kind of always like listening to little remixes of those things. I had a friend who had like a whole bunch of MP3s of like Black Mages and other types of remixes for the Final Fantasy series, and I had that on my parents' computer for years. And sometimes I would just like pop those in. I would make little short films in high school, and a lot of them have Black Mages music in the background, frankly. So like, including my favorite track off of this album. So, I've very familiar with the music of Nobuo Uematsu, who's the main composer for most of the Final Fantasy series, and really familiar with a lot of these tracks, and just years and years, actually. Like, I don't know, 12, 13 years of listening to this music. So there you go. That's my history with that. And with Final Fantasy, of course, I have a Final Fantasy podcast, and I've been going through every single console-released Final Fantasy game over the last 5 years, and we're about to wrap up soon, so this is interesting territory to go into on your guys' podcast. But yeah, long history of Final Fantasy.
Well, let's shift gears completely. Hey, Steve, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Greg? Thanks for having me on your podcast.
I mean, you're the co-host. You're my trusty sidekick. You're the Andy Richter to my Conan O'Brien.
I'm your engineer.
Right, that's true. You're the one with the good mics, because I'm broke as fuck.
Woo! It is your pop filter, though.
Reppin', you're the one using it.
Actually, nobody's using it right now because
true.
I'm lazy. Also, I know how to use mic technique so I don't pop into my mics.
So, we're all going to be watching for that one.
So Steve, what's your history with Final Fantasy music and this album?
So I've never played all the way through a Final Fantasy game, and I've very rarely listened
to... Hey, you beat Soul of Rebirth. I count that.
That does not count. I've very rarely listened to more than 15 to 30 seconds of any Black Mages song, depending on how... I just popped right into my mic. Depending on how long the AMV Hell clip was. So that's most of my experience with the Black Mages specifically. I mean, I have listened to them occasionally. I think they played the anime convention here in Nashville once, and so I heard a little bit of them as I walked by the main room once, busy with some task of some sort, putting up signs telling people where to stand or whatever. That's really about it. I have a passing familiarity with the band, a mild appreciation for them, but I'd never actually sat down and listened to them deeply. To be fair, I still haven't. I listened to the album once, and then I messaged Greg and said, I don't have strong enough opinions on these songs to rank them, and then he needled me until I gave him some kind of ranking. So if you guys are concerned that the numbers are all wrong at any given point, it's probably on me.
But here's what I will say. Steve is just the Kefka of this panel. An agent of chaos. Just setting things in ways that they shouldn't be set. Moving the statues, moving the rankings, just for the sake of the lulz. So...
Wow.
I almost understood that reference.
Powerful.
Alright, replace Kefka with the Joker. But, add magic. There you go, that's Kefka.
I'm like the Joker with magic.
Right.
If the Joker could cast Firaga.
Yeah, if the Joker was really into playing card games.
Wait, hold on, he is. That's one of his major visual motifs.
But different card games with monsters and hit points. And actually, I don't know how Magic the Gathering is played. I'm a really bad fake nerd.
Wait, does Kefka play Magic the Gathering?
No, I just said with magic, and that's why I said a card game. It was a nerdy joke.
Well, you see, you got to collect. I mean, you've played
jokes
Yu-Gi-Oh,
are funnier when you explain them.
They are.
I agree more.
Yet another joke about death, perplexing some, and just plain scaring most.
All right, let's shift things over to Andrew. It's his first time on the podcast. We're going to put him right in the middle. So, Andrew, what's your experience with Final Fantasy, this album in particular? Whatever you want to, just give your brief history, whatever you want to say.
Sure. So, I was first getting into video games right about when Final Fantasy VII came into reality, and I was obsessed with it, but I was terrible at it, playing at my friend's house. And then eventually I would borrow the guidebook from him and just read it at school, even though I had no way to play the game. And then eventually I saved up enough money to buy the game and beat it, when I was 12 or something like that. But it's I don't know, Final Fantasy VII has always been my top one. But then I got into 8 and 10 and then 12 and Tactics Advanced and all that stuff. But 7, there's just something about the atmosphere in that game and the tone of it that really always stayed with me, like in the back of my head, and like this way that transcended the video game. So like it's hard for me to chase that feeling with the other Final Fantasy games, which they're cool video games, but they don't really like, stay with me all the time like Final Fantasy 7 did for like 15 years or whatever. But then this album, let's see, probably about 10 years ago, I was looking to listen to more like metal music and more video game music, and I was really into like black metal and like some pretty aggressive stuff, and this wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be when I first heard there's like a metal version of the Final Fantasy soundtrack. So I liked it, but it was just a little bit too, I don't know, kind of wimpy sounding for me at the time. But since then, I've come to appreciate it for what it is. I like what they did within the limitations of staying pretty true to the original soundtrack. I was just kind of hoping there'd be something where it's a little bit more of an intense change from the original composition, but I understand what they were going for. So it's a good album. I'm glad it's out there.
Wait, did you ever manage to find that black metal version of the Final Fantasy soundtrack? Because
no, but
I want to hear this.
I know, right? Oh, that'd be awesome.
That would be amazing.
I mean, you could just play a random black metal song and say it's the Final Fantasy soundtrack. With the lack of melody that genre has, you could make that bullshit case.
Man, Greg.
Like,
just in case Drew is listening to this episode.
I don't have any whiskey.
I really love like what August Burns Red has done with the Christmas music genre, for example. Like, there's so many good, like, really hardcore Christmas songs, which is odd, but you'd think there'd be more like video game music that was given that treatment. Like, I don't know.
Have you heard Machine Supremacy?
No.
They are a Finnish, somewhere in Scandinavia. They are a power metal band that, instead of singing the usual songs about like, we are off to fight the dragon, their songs are all about, we are off to fight the dragon in a video game. and then they use a SID station for their music. They toured the United States a couple years back, and I was texting Greg photos of them because the lead singer wears the same Naruto gloves that he does on stage.
That's so funny.
It's like, I'm just sitting up there from like, nerd!
Well, hey, I don't wear the Naruto gloves anymore because we're not singing about believing in yourself and following your dreams. We're singing about getting laid.
No, yes, we're a mature and responsible grown-up band now. What's
That's
more
the image change you were talking about?
Yep. What's more mature than giving up on your dreams and trying to get laid?
Steve was talking to me about certain aspects of the music video before we were recording today. It was like, Greg, are you aware that like people can see your bulge in that video? I'm like, yeah, so?
I was just trying to figure out like which one of us should broach it with the director. Be like, hey, please make sure to edit out Greg's dick.
No, and I'm like, please, extra shots of my dick.
Yeah, so you're probably going to need to message him and let him know.
Yeah, like, make sure, the close-ups of the pelvic thrust.
Oh, man.
We specifically gave him instructions saying that the only butt he was allowed to zoom in on was Greg's.
That's true.
Wow.
Is it any good, Steve?
Greg's butt or the video?
Yeah. Greg's butt.
I don't
Dude,
know.
my butt is fantastic.
He doesn't bike as much as me.
Turn on your video.
So
Turn
I'm
on
sure
your
it's
video.
fine.
Turn on your camera and let us see.
I don't actually have a camera, just my phone.
All right, but I will look here.
Is it a squatter's butt or a biker's butt?
Dude, I've got, because on stage one of my moves is shaking my butt, so I've got years of butt shaking experience. So it is a nice, firm, supple butt. Also doing glam rock, wearing heels. So like I've got like a little bit of the girl booty, but I run, so it's like it's right. It's a nice booty. It's a nice booty. It's an appropriate glam rock booty.
Yeah, well rounded. I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
You've seen that photo that's been making the rounds. That's of like back shots of both Captain Marvel and Peter Parker, and somebody commented that life's not fair just because Peter Parker has the far superior butt.
I've not seen that. That's very interesting.
So I have a great idea. So while Victor does his intro, I'm going to look for a good picture of my butt. So Victor, tell us a little bit about your history with the music and such while I look for a picture of my butt.
You want to look for mine while you're at it, Greg?
No, I'm not. Man, I don't know how to find a picture of your butt that quickly.
I I've been a Final Fantasy fan for a hot minute, probably about half my life now. I got access to Final Fantasy VI around the time that Final Fantasy X came out, and I've kind of been behind on video games like that ever since. And I have since played all of the non-MMOs, and I've beaten most of them, and am in fact, I have started a playthrough of 8. So I'm working way on an official playthrough of 8 right now, and I think the main thing that drew me to them was the soundtracks, actually. So I more than playing the games, I would listen to the music, and I had heard that the Black Mages were a thing that existed, and it was interesting. I was like, oh, that metal band playing this music, I'm sure that's very fun for them to do. And now, having listened to the album, it was fun for them, I'm sure. Not as fun for me.
Wow.
Ouch. Ah.
All right. No, that's not a picture of my butt, Steve.
No, but I was showing him that picture that I was explaining.
All right.
That's a pretty great comparison. That's interesting.
Oh my God.
All right, so Steve, I'm about to email you a picture of my butt.
Okay.
For you to send to everybody.
This is the worst episode we've ever done, or maybe
Check
the
in the
best.
description of this episode.
That needs to be the thumbnail for this.
The thumbnail will be a picture of my butt, not the album cover. Okay, so ironically, I probably have a lot of history with this album in particular. So going back, young Greg was not a fan of music. I grew up in the 90s, the era of nu metal and boy bands, and I just thought that music was bad, terrible, had no interest in it. But as a kid, I really fell in love with JRPGs and loved the soundtracks for those games, thought they were amazing. So, I mean, there were a couple musical things I liked as a kid, like I thought the Beatles were cool and I liked Michael Jackson. Eventually bought a Queen CD. But, my favorite music as a kid was probably video game soundtracks, and the Final Fantasy series was by far my favorite. And so eventually I fell into the rock scene, and I ended up working on an album with a guy named Billy Morris, who used to play in Warrant and Quiet Riot and a whole bunch of other bands. And while I was recording the album with him, we did a lot of trades. So it'd be like, some days it would be just like, hey, I'll just pay you a fee for playing guitar on the album. And then some days it'd be like, hey, Greg, if you help me move some of my equipment, I'll play for you for free this day. And so we did a lot of like trading back and forth of services, him playing guitar and producing the album, and then me helping him out with random stuff. And so he had a nightclub in town, and he needed a DJ to play metal music. And he's like, Greg, I want you to be the DJ at my metal club. And I'm like, sweet. So I played some Black Mages music as part of my playlist. Like I played Metallica, I played Slayer, I played some bands that I wasn't as into that the crowd was into. And even though I wasn't playing video games actively at that point in my life, I still had a lot of affection for the music of this series, and wanted to give a little shout out and like acknowledge that it was still part of my life in a small way. And hopefully turn some people onto the music of Nobuo Uematsu through my DJing. And like the prog rock nerds who were there thought it was awesome. They're just like, man, this keyboard sounds like Deep Purple. I'm like, yeah, it does.
Yes,
So,
it does.
so I've been familiar with this album for a very long time. But then going back to it, it lost a lot of luster for me. And a lot of things, it didn't hold up as well upon my latest listens. And then I did some research into the band and saw who the guitar player was. Tsuyoshi Sakito, who did the arrangements for the Final Fantasy 1 and 2 remakes, and also did one of my favorite game soundtracks of all time, Brave Fencer Musashi. And then I started to connect a bunch of dots in my head, where I figured out how this band came about. He was rearranging those songs for re-release, and he's a guitar nerd, so he was probably busy riffing on the songs, thought they were fun, invited everyone over to jam and said we should form a band. And that's just how the Black Mages came into being. If you look at that timeline, that's probably what went down. So I tracked the dude down on Facebook, became his Facebook friend, and we've just been chatting about Van Halen and Dream Theater and shit. And just a nice dude, and made me completely reevaluate the album, where I'm like, okay, now knowing the personalities involved, does that change my perspective on the guitar technique, on the arrangement? And it's still ultimately a mixed bag for me overall, but, you know, finding out that he was involved, and he was sort of the guy with the idea of rearranging all these songs and just riffing on them on his guitar because he was having fun working on the soundtracks, gave me a new appreciation for it, and helped me look at it from a different perspective, which I hope I can help bring some of that into the discussion. And a picture of my butt is being sent.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah,
That's mostly a shirt.
There's hint of butt in there.
There's hint of butt. I see lower cheek.
But, you know, semi-obscured. I think you're doing all right here.
Yeah, you got to maintain a little bit of class. You don't just like wave the whole thing out there.
Right, but I'm saying, like, you can see that it's supple. and look, you can tell by the legs that I'm not a fatty. So it's like, that is a nice, you know, supple buttocks.
All right.
To be fair, that is that is largely the point of heels. What is it, like every inch of loft in your heels makes your butt stick out by another half inch kind of thing?
Is there a mathematical equation there?
There is some math for this. I don't know it exactly off the top of my head, but it's sort of a documented thing.
Good. Looks good, Greg.
Thank you.
Nice
Really looking forward to that video now.
Hey, Greg, who'd you say the guitarist was again?
Tsuyoshi Sekito.
Sekito. Did he do all the guitar?
All the guitar is him.
Okay. He's great.
Yeah, no, he is.
Dude can shred.
He is. The thing is, I knew he was a great composer for many, many years because his soundtrack for Brave Fencer Musashi is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated in video game. Where just his use of motifs and themes and the way they play throughout the soundtrack, like, it's a very excellent, cohesive piece. But each track is also like melodically catchy on its own. So it's just fantastic. His arrangements for the Soul of Rebirth and PlayStation ports, you know, I thought were really good. We discussed that on when we did the Final Fantasy 1 and 2 soundtrack episodes with Joe, and how much I liked the rearrangements and what was done with them. And so then find out that, you know, he was the guitar player, and like, oh, and he can shred too. Like, just a lot of respect for him as a musician, and just a pleasant guy to chat with. There is the language barrier, but through Google Translate, we are able to talk about ripping guitar solos. So just nice guy.
The universal language of ripping guitar solos.
Right. I mean, that's something everyone understands.
I wrote a short film about that.
Nice.
Just wrote it? Did you film it or what?
No, it was after film school, so I didn't have the personnel around.
Oh, okay. Isn't that all right? Another discussion for another day. Cool.
Yeah, another day. We can make the episode about that though, if you want.
About film school?
Yeah.
About film school or butts.
Oh man.
Hell yeah.
Well, you know, instead of that, how about we get into the ranking?
Okay.
Sure.
Fine.
I suppose.
Oh, Steve, you're just here for jokes.
It's true. I'm just here for jokes. And to find pictures of my own butt because somebody doesn't have my back, as it were.
Oh.
Hey.
Look, man, I'm busy hosting the show. You gotta look at pictures of your butt while you're ignoring us.
Yes.
All right, so coming in as the least best song from the Black Mages, we've got Battle Scene from Final Fantasy 1 coming in at the bottom of the ranking.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody went to bat for this one. Joe did.
Yeah, Joe went to bat for it.
I guess. I like all the pieces on this thing, and this one's kind of like middle of the track for me. It's got kind of a weird, for an album opener, it's kind of odd. It's really like mellow opening for a battle scene. It's got that psychedelic edge that this whole album basically has. Interesting keyboard choices was what I wrote down.
Yeah.
I do love the multiple solos section. Of course, that is almost every song on this album. There's like everybody's like trading off with our solos. I do love. Now, this was before I started to suspect that the bass was not a real bass. I do love the slapping of the bass in this piece of music, and the bass guitar / bass keyboard thing.
Slapping the
is
keys.
The star. It's the star of this track. I'm a real big fan of that. So yeah, I really love the bass work in this thing. So I dig this piece of music. So that's where I'm at.
So where I'm at with a lot of these pieces is that, as I was just complimenting Sakito and his arrangements, I don't think that a lot of these are necessarily the best arranged in allowing the melodies of the pieces to shine. And, all right, so surprise, Greg is talking about melody on a podcast. That never happens on this show. But my big thing, especially working in the bands that I've been in, I've always been focused on what will make the individual song sound the best, and not about what part is going to make each musician sound the best. So there will be times where I'll be working with a musician, and like on the first Lipstick album, there was a song where Billy Morris really wanted to do a very complicated bass part, but then it trampled on top of the melody, and I said, we can't do that because it doesn't work as a cohesive whole. I've had that with guitar players. Steve is usually very open to me critiquing arrangement, because for me it's about the finished product and not about just like the isolated track. So you can have a really great drum part, but if it doesn't work with the rest of the song, it doesn't work. And so a lot of the arrangement choices I found makes the melody less catchy. And I understand it's a reinterpretation of these pieces. It's not meant to be exactly the same. It's meant to do something different. But unfortunately, sometimes what's different loses some of the greatest parts of the original. So, Joe, you mentioned on our Final Fantasy 1 episode, there was a build in this battle theme that you really liked that is essentially missing completely from this version. We get some different cool stuff in exchange, like the opening riff is kind of like a cool chugging, rock metal thing, but we lose some melodic parts that were very good in the original, and on top of that, I feel that a lot of the solos on this album entirely don't melodically flow very well between the sections, where they're very well done solos, but they don't match the melodic themes of the rest of the piece, and like the chord progressions underneath are a little bit more awkward, and it doesn't flow as an entire piece for me. That also said, this piece I was never a big fan of anyway. It's one of my lowest ranked battle themes in the series. So all those things combined made me rank it, pretty low. I ranked it at the bottom. So I still actually enjoy the piece. I still think it's good. Everyone's playing competently. But like the fact that it detracted so much from what the original had in a positive way is why I had to rank it at the bottom.
Yeah, it sounds like they just tried to use too many different like synthesizer sounds or effect pedals or whatever. It's just like every, 30 seconds or so, it's like they just kind of switched out the guitar. It just kind of seemed disjointed and like it was just a bunch of people playing guitar, not like a band. That's kind of what messed it up for me, is like there wasn't a good sound, a cohesive sound to the melody. It just kept changing instruments. It was weird. But yeah, this is my least favorite song on the album, unfortunately.
And I mean, ironically, this was before they were a real band, where the instrument that is fake on this album is the drums.
Wow.
And so then they eventually, when they started playing live shows, they got a drummer and they got a live bassist. But yeah, the bass was real. The drums were what were fake on this album.
The instrument that was fake was the band.
Ooh.
Oh, I think there's some on another track. On another 2 tracks. There's some like bass runs that sound like a keyboard.
Oh yeah, there's
bass.
definitely a lot of keyboard bass on this.
Oh yeah,
album.
no, there's keyboard bass too, but there's live bass also.
I suspect there's some live bass mixed in with some keyboard bass. In the
absolutely.
background. Like the bass playing is a little too perfect. I kind of suspect, especially in this track, all that like beautiful slapping. I suspect some bass stuff. Honestly, guys, I know you guys are all kind of like not having this track, but I love the bass guitar stuff on this track, and it brought it up so far for me on that one. I love good bass. So that's the only one that didn't change tones, I guess. It was kind of crazy and all over the place.
Honestly, I think this song is pretty good, and I'm a little surprised I ranked it second from the bottom. Why did I, Greg?
So the reason that you ranked it so low, Steve, is that you said there's only a couple tracks I care about, and then I argued with you about how you wanted me to rank all the other ones and give them points, and so we just randomly would match someone else's ranking.
You got me there, but nobody else ranked this second from the bottom.
Yeah, because it was the only one where I couldn't find a direct match.
So that was just the number that was left?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
But honestly, even if you ranked it, you'd have to rank it much higher for it to have made a difference.
Oh yeah, this is 7 points away from the next one.
Yeah, so even if it got randomly put somewhere else, this still likely would have been ranked at the bottom, Agent of Chaos or not.
Shitty Agent of Chaos. That's what they call me.
Indifferent Agent of Chaos.
Agent of Chaos.
Any other comments on battle scene from Final Fantasy 1 before we move on?
I really like how it starts, and then the rest of it, it's just like as it goes on, I kind of lose interest.
I think you're right, Greg. This is not the best arrangement of this battle music for this game. I will agree with you on that. I think it's a cool arrangement, but it's not the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's cool. And the thing is, when you listen to this album, you can definitely see this was actually a hugely influential album. Because if you look at every, like, shitty YouTube cover of a video game song, a lot of them sound like the Black Mages. Like, this sort of, like, set the template of the kind of guitar tones those, you know, musicians use, the kind of drum sounds they use. Like, this set the template for a lot of, like, metal video game covers. And, you know, is this really a metal album? You know, that's up to debate as to what you consider metal. I mean, it's a little bit more of a rock album in terms of arrangement, especially like those keys. Those are very much like 70s prog rock. Like, guys, we've been listening to a ton of Yes, and they're sick. So, but then you have those, you know, more chugging lower end guitars, which is more of a metal thing than a rock thing. So where do you place it in the spectrum? I think Square Enix called it a metal album to market it easier. But it's just like there's certain tracks where you listen to it like this isn't even a metal song. This is basically just a video game song, like with a couple metal elements. Like we'll get to a certain track where I'm like, this is not a metal song, but it's cool. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just how they market it, but it's really just they felt like doing arrangements of the songs in this way and then made a band out of it. They were just having fun jamming. But yeah, so next up on the list, we have Battle Scene 2 from Final Fantasy 2.
Hey, this is one of the ones I actually had an opinion on.
There you go.
It sounded MIDI-y.
Yeah.
So I ranked it at the bottom.
Dude, this was my number one song. I am like shocked right now. What? Yeah.
Oh, this is a very swingy panel. Like there is, aside from Steve being the Agent of Chaos, like this is. So this got 20 total points. You gave it 10 of them. So half of the song's points are from you.
Good job.
Wow, that is so strange. I spent a lot of time making sure that my list was in order. And I'm like, I mean, obviously this is number one, but you know, there's a couple of places where there were sort of ties, but this was definitely number one.
Look, man, I told you your ranking was full of shit.
Wow.
Oh wait, no, I didn't. You're the only person whose ranking I didn't tell was full of shit. I'm like, I'll be nice. It's his first time on the show.
Yeah, never seen me rank anything before. I based it on a system of, there were 3 different categories I scored each song on a scale of 1 to 10, and then just added up the scores. And it was the instrumentation, the rhythm, and the melody. So you should be thankful or excited about that one, Greg. But
mildly, yes.
Yeah. For me, I thought the synth and the guitar tones were really good, and I really loved the rhythm on this song. Like the bridge / B section, or whatever you want to call it, is such a cool change of pace that this is the one that gets stuck in my head all the time, and this is just my favorite song on the album. The main theme I like a lot, although it does get a little bit repetitive, but I stand behind it. It's my favorite one. I love the kind of atmospheric, almost like a Renaissance fair vibe to that B section. It gets me going. I like this song. But you guys can rip it up. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the thing is, once it sort of suffers from the same issues that the last track did. And that'll sort of be a repeating criticism until we get higher in the ranking with a lot of these. So some of the decisions makes the melody not shine as much as the original, or as in Sakito's other arrangements of this piece. What I would say, this one does a better job of not losing as. Sorry, a picture of Steve's butt is distracted.
I finally found a picture of my butt. I'm usually mugging for the camera, so.
Yeah, but no, that's a great butt shot.
Is it butt mugging?
It is butt mugging. So I'll get back to this while we're anxiously awaiting Steve's butt. So the trick with this piece is that it doesn't lose as many good parts from the original incarnation of the song as the Final Fantasy I's battle theme did in the soundtrack. So that's one reason it gets additional points. Another reason it gets additional points is that neoclassical breakdown section. I'm a big Randy Rhoads, Ozzy Osbourne fan. I think the first 3 Ozzy albums, so the 2 he did with Randy Rhoads and the first album he did with Jake E. Lee, are fantastic albums. Front to back, amazing guitar playing, and so this definitely has an early solo Ozzy feel from those first 3 albums. So that's going to win some significant points for me, just as a musician appreciating that kind of playing. So that different aspect, and the fact that it really fits in well with 2 thematically, because that one is very much a medieval fantasy world without as much like weird little things that don't fit into a fantasy world. Like there's no moon whale in FF2.
There's whales on the moon?
Yes.
Like in the Futurama episode?
Like Gojira, man. Those space whales.
Those whales are on Mars. They're not telling tall tales and singing a wailing tune.
But the fact that like it is perhaps the most like traditional medieval of all the Final Fantasies is why that neoclassical section really works, and why that score actually works really well together as a cohesive piece. Like it really fits in well with the moody, melancholy atmosphere of that game. So I mean, it's a good piece. It's done well, but it's still not shining as much as some of the other tracks. And the initial composition is one of my weaker battle themes in the series also. Better than the FF1 battle theme, I think, but still weaker in the series overall.
I like the song. I really like the little chugs, the dun dun, and then you hear like the little melody thing in between. I really like that. Thought it was a pretty cool piece. This was the song that gave me the hey, this bass might not be real thing for the first time. It's got a super 80s keyboard trumpet part that I find kind of cheesy. So that's why it's a little lower for me, but it's still a very cool track. So those are my thoughts on Battle Scene 2.
You did rank it higher than me. Victor, you ranked it lower than me.
I have my notes that kind of span every listen that I did. I would kind of just add to stuff as I listened to it more. And from the first time I listened to it, I wrote, I'm not a fan of the overall vibe of this album, but this is one of the few that feels truly misguided in its execution.
Wow. Savage.
Wow.
But I think in my more recent listens, I was kind of like, I wasn't mad at it anymore, but this one just really didn't do a lot for me, but I do note that the guitars sound great as usual.
I'm not angry, just disappointed.
and then there's the break about 2 minutes in is really cool.
Yeah, I think everyone has touched on like that break being a cool section. And I think what I would say about this entire album is that basically every track is good in isolation. But as an entire album listening experience, unless you're a really big fan of the Final Fantasy music, I don't know if this is like an album for everybody. You can play an individual song, DJing at a metal club, and if it's in between, Metallica and Soundgarden, people are like, yeah, that was a cool instrumental. So it fits in well in my metal DJ context, but it might not fit well in the let's listen to all these in a row context.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Any other comments on Battle Scene 2 before we move on? Apparently not.
No, I'm done talking about this crappy song.
All right, I'm done talking about this crappy song. All right. Next up on the list, we have Fight with Seymour. Okay, so most of you nerds are wrong about this one. This is one of the best pieces on the album.
Go ahead.
It's all right.
From Final Fantasy X.
It's really just
Fight
me
with
and
Seymour.
Joe who are wrong.
Yeah, so really just Joe is wrong. So here's the
No,
thing.
I agree with Joe, though. Final Fantasy X sucked.
Hey.
This I don't want to hear. This I don't want to hear at all.
Do not.
You know what? I'm actually
That
going
Agent of Chaos has taken a step too far.
You know why? You know why I ranked this low, Greg?
Go ahead.
You know why I ranked it at the bottom? It's because of that cymbal sound.
Yeah,
Drove me nuts.
it's like a fake
hitting-
China symbol.
It's hitting a part of my like eardrum that like makes my head hurt every time it does it. And it's like 2/3 of that song has that little like splash cymbal, and it just sounds terrible. Otherwise, it's a pretty cool rock track, but that cymbal, if that cymbal was taken out, we might have a totally different ranking.
So is it
That
just the
symbol
way
could've
the
changed the
symbol
whole
is
song. I
produced or
agree.
the playing?
If it was a real China symbol, I would have loved this song, but it annoyed me so bad. It sounded like an old version of Fruity Loops or something. Like that was just such a
I mean,
terrible.
it might have been
I
an
mean,
old
yeah,
version of
odds are
Fruit Loops.
good. That's how they did this.
What?
Yeah, because this is what, like 2002, 2003? This first
Yeah,
Black
like,
Mages
yeah,
album?
2003, yeah.
Yeah. So,
early days of, like, DAW. Not early days of DAW, but, like, early DAWs, earlier days of sample-based electronic
sample
music.
drums. Yeah, so, this is...
I mean, sampled music has been around since like the late 70s, though. So like, I don't know. They could have.
Digital sampling, though, has
Yeah, I guess you're right.
often been a little bit cheesy. Like,
Yeah.
Like a sampler has a pretty distinct sound where it's like a repeated actual live sound over and over
Yeah.
again. But digital samples tend to be like weirdly compressed or like constructed out of non-natural noises.
Right. You're totally right on that. This definitely comes from that more digital side than the more analog side. That sounded so bad.
Yeah, I think I just have a forgiveness for shitty drum sounds because I'm, in a band where Steve is the drummer. So, also on top of that, listening to a lot of video game music, being used to just like lower quality MIDI drums. So I maybe have known myself to that a bit. Also, like Steve is drumming in that band poorly on purpose, so I'll give him some credit as being a competent musician. But it was for the sake of the joke.
Right. I mean, you really shouldn't hold Snake Vomit as the bar for anything.
That's fair. But
I can listen to a couple tracks of that. Whew.
Well, I think you listened to my solo Snake Vomit music, not Snake Vomit proper.
Oh, yeah.
You have to listen to Snake Vomit, the entire band, the cohesive experience.
There's a lot less MIDI in the real version.
Oh God.
We all did.
Right.
We all did Snake Vomit solo album. So that you just heard my Snake Vomit solo album. But
Oh well. That is...
Did you make him listen to Trent, Greg?
I told him to listen to the beginning of it, not the entire thing.
You're a bad friend.
Yes, I am. But
All right, next up.
no, I haven't actually talked about this piece yet. So the thing is, fight with Seymour. Seymour is a less cool villain in the Final Fantasy series. Like his voice just doesn't sound super threatening. He's got a goofy hairstyle, and you're just like, man, I just want to fight this dude so I can like fight my dad instead, because that's way cooler. Get this blue-haired antler guy out of the way so I can get to the cool villains. I think he works very...
The cool villain, my dad.
The cool villain, my dad. I mean, your dad in Final Fantasy X is actually really cool.
That was the plot of Daddy Fantasy or whatever it was, right?
Something like that. But just
The
like your
TV show they produced.
your alcoholic former sports star dad. Great character. But Seymour, just like when you're coming off the heels of villains like Kefka and Sephiroth, he's just not as awesome. He's very competent for the story. He's a good foil to the characters, but you're not like, man, that guy is super cool. You're just like, yeah, he gets the job done. And so
He gets the job of villainy done.
he gets the job of villainy
Yeah.
done. Better, like, upper half of the series, but still just like not like, yeah, this dude is awesome and you're pumped about him. And so that, when you associate this with his character, you're like, oh yeah, that character isn't as cool. So in many ways, this song isn't as cool. But as a composition, it's one of the best boss themes in the series. Incredibly catchy, good build, good moving parts that flow together very well. And this is one of the tracks where the great things about the original are not lost in this version at all, where this version is basically just as good as the original version. You could listen to either or, both are great. And I think this is one of the ones where it just really shines. I think it was the closing track for a reason, because it's one of the stronger pieces. And you had to follow Dancing Mad with something really strong, really catchy, and that's what this piece is. It's really strong, it's really catchy, it's got a great melody, and the different instruments work very well together in this piece, aside from the splash cymbal, which is a very good part, but perhaps they could have used a better sample. But like the keys and everything on this track, they work so great together.
All right.
But also, it's not even really a metal song. Like, it's just like, hey, here's video game music.
Yeah, that's true. It's got a lot of like dramatic tension, and like it kind of tells a story, which I really like. And it's just a cool song. I especially love like 2 minutes and on. There's like a really cool dramatic tension and this like really funky rhythm. It's a cool song. I really do like this one. It's definitely my top half for the album.
Any other comments on Fight with Seymour before we move on?
FF10 has a bunch of super goofy boss themes like this, but I feel like this is overall a pretty faithful adaptation. So I'm into it. Not my favorite, though.
All right, well, next up on the list is a track that I think is great that everyone disagrees with me on. We've got Genova next on the list.
Is it pronounced Genova or is it Jenova?
I mean, voice acting, so actually, no, it's Genova. It's Genova. I saw Advent Children. It's Genova.
But is it normally spelled with the hyphens like that?
Yeah,
No.
it's hyphenated in this on the album.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I meant. Like,
it's hyphenated in the score as well, but I think in the game it's just Genova.
okay.
Maybe he's trying to depict something alien and like a different,
That's exactly
way of
what it is.
using letters. Yeah.
Or maybe that's meant to be the lyrics of the song.
Ooh.
Jenova. It's fun to stay at the Jenova.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I think this is one of the best pieces of music in the series. I think it really exemplifies the alien vibe of Genova really well in the first half of the song, but then when it moves into the more heroic section, it really gives you like that sense of hope that you can defeat this boss, and so I think it's a very good ebb and flow, works very well as a boss theme, and I think that the melodies are ultimately retained in this version, and I like that it's got the sort of the disco drum beat as a change of pace, where I don't think this is a metal song, but I think it's great.
No.
Interesting choice of words, change of pace. This has the same drum beat through the entire song.
Right, but this drum beat is different than the other drum beats. And look, have you ever been to a disco club? It's all about keeping that, same beat so you can shake your butt.
I feel like there's a Gish joke in here somewhere. I'll chair myself
I feel like
out.
we're talking enough about
Remember how you said we were going to try to avoid in-jokes on episodes that didn't make sense?
Yeah. I remember
What?
nothing.
Hey, this is a weird piece of music. I do think it's fitting for the character in the game because, Genova comes from space. So it's got this kind of like weird, kind of psychedelic kind of dealio going on with it, with the organs and the keyboard stuff. Mostly it's just an amped up version of the original. A bit too much keyboard for me, though, and I think I like the original version better. I mean, it's fine for what it is, but it's definitely not going to be ranked very high on my list.
Yeah, I prefer the original version as well. It's super awesome in the game, and this is kind of like it takes a really weird turn near the end that I was kind of into, but I kind of wish the album had more stuff like that, but since this is the only one that has it, it's just super weird.
Yeah, I think this one, so some of these pieces got a higher ranking from me based not solely upon the album version, but like how strong I thought the composition was in general. So this one ranked highly for me because I think it's one of the best composed pieces in the series. The album version, that we're discussing here, I don't think is as good as the original either. But because I thought the composition was so strong and that it retained enough of that spirit is why I ranked it as high as I did. So I don't think that it's a bad version of it. I think, the changes in the different instrumental breaks in this one work a lot better than in some of the other ones. Where, like, in some of the other ones, they'll be like, that's a sweet solo that doesn't fit at all with what just happened. The soloing that goes on in this piece all flows together and feels like it could have been part of the original composition. At least for me.
Yeah, I could get down on that. I believe that.
Any other comments on Genova before we move on?
Is Steve dead?
Hi.
No, Steve's just waiting for the chance to make jokes.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I'm here for is jokes.
Yeah,
He's
there's
concentrating super hard on giving a shit about this.
Must care.
the thing is, so Steve told me when listening to this is that the songs did not stand out to him as distinct aside from 3 of them.
Right.
1 was particularly bad, and 2 were particularly good. So when we get to those songs, he will comment on them. Otherwise, he's just here to sort of make fun of me.
Right. So, I mean, my general take on this album is it's all good music. This genre of, like, metal covers of video game songs, I'm into. I enjoy listening to it. But I'm not interested in, like, really putting a lot of mental effort into, like, breaking it down and understand. It's just, like, it's really good background music.
It's like
as a programmer, this is like perfect working music. The sort of thing you just have going to help you stay focused while you do your job.
It's like Gish, where if you listen to it once, there's no way you're going to actually remember what it sounds like.
I know a lot of nerds who haven't necessarily beaten any Final Fantasy games, but listen to the Black Mages on loop.
Yeah.
So, yeah, totally. Exactly. That was the very good observation, Steve.
See, he's contributing.
There's science.
Here's a pat on the back, buddy.
I love
I'm glad you're here, Steve.
Too.
At least we're not talking about Metallica today.
I don't have direct access to the mandatory Metallica drop. It's just in the Sting category. That could have been the Metallica drop. It was that instead.
This is me hanging up now. Thank you.
Well, it was good to have you. Where can we find you? Where can we find Lipstick Online, Greg?
Wait, so I will say this: I am open to doing more Metallica episodes, as I recently binged the entire catalog with Caleb. So like all that is very fresh in my mind. That entire catalog.
I want to do the Lulu episode.
I did not.
I've never finished Lulu.
I did not actually listen to Lulu as part of our
time. It's fucking horrible.
Oh, it's terrible. It's a Lou Reed album, all right? Not a Metallica album.
I mean, Lou Reed's pretty great, but also I haven't listened to Lulu in its entirety, so I'm not going to judge it.
God. You know what? The way things are, you might love it, Greg.
I mean, I have a low tolerance for avant-garde bullshit, though.
It's that whole album.
Yeah. I mean, if you've heard me rant about Revolution number 9, like, avant-garde bullshit does not go well with me.
But you do have a huge tolerance for troll music.
That's true.
So avant-garde troll music you're super into.
Right, that's true. So I guess it depends on, like, whether or not I view them as good trolls or not.
Right. Avant-garde is really just about framing.
Right.
Like, do I feel like the authors of this song are attempting to make fun of me with this?
Yes.
If so, I'm into it.
If the authors of this song are, like, trying to be serious, fuck them. And that's how
pretentious assholes.
That's how I am with avant-garde.
That's pretty relatable, honestly. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's fair. It's a good assessment of high art in general, I think.
Yes.
Badass. Lulu is the #1 rated track on the Black Mages album 1.
Well, we'll see when we get there. But next up on the list, we have, hey, it's a song Steve cares about.
Hey!
We've got the battle theme from Final Fantasy VI, and that's on the list. AKA second from the bottom for Greg.
Yep.
Bottom for Victor.
This is battle theme, not battle scene.
Correct. Battle theme.
Not decisive battle, which is also for Final Fantasy VI.
Not the decisive battle.
Decisive bridge fight scene theme.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mad.
All right, so this is the main battle theme from Final Fantasy VI, metal cover as done by the Black Mages.
Which I'm pretty sure is like the single from this album, isn't it?
Possibly. I don't know what was released as a single. this might be my least favorite main battle theme in the series, just from a composition standpoint. In the sense that the melodic phrasing and like the way they choose to do it, it actually kind of annoys me a little bit. Which, is possibly one reason why, I don't have the giant boner for 6 that everyone else does. If I'm getting mildly annoyed with the battle theme, I think that the theme, it's like in terms of like the scales and stuff it's using, it's a little bit closer to like Middle Eastern music than traditional Western music or than most Japanese music. So because it's sort of following that kind of Middle Eastern scale pattern, it's a little bit less pleasurable to listen to as a melodic piece. And when you want something that's melodic and catchy that doesn't get annoying upon repeated listens as you're playing through the game over and over, I think that doesn't work for me as a listener in particular. I like my battle themes to have sort of a balance of desperation and heroism. It's why I rank the ones from 1 and 2 a little bit lower, because it's more just the desperation side of things and not the heroism side of things. And 6, like those battle themes, it's pretty much all the desperation side of things. And so it's really good at building tension, and I acknowledge that. And it is catchy. It's a well done theme. But because it's sort of just always keeping that tension and never like resolving to a place where it feels like you have a chance to win the battle, it's why it doesn't grab me as a listener. But that said, I've grown to appreciate the track over time. I do enjoy it. And I think this version, I would say, is actually better than the original. It does a better job of allowing me to enjoy the melody and enjoy the entire piece. But because I didn't enjoy the original that much, that's why I ranked it second from the bottom. So
that seemed like a really long-winded way to say I didn't like it because I'm a little racist.
Yeah, this
Yet another joke about death, perplexing some, and just plain scaring most.
What the hell is that from?
Wizard People, Dear Reader.
What the fuck? What is that?
It's Brad Neely, the cartoonist behind China, Illinois, and the Professor Brothers. He
three things in a row that I've never heard of.
Anyway, so he's a cartoonist that had some internet fame in the mid-2000s, and he did a re-narration of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the film, that synced up with the movie, and you would mute the movie and you would watch this along with it, and it's just he narrates the entire story in that kind of gruff voice, and Harry Potter is very drunk and Dumbledore is the nearly dead Dumbledore, and it's pretty great, other than the fact that he almost got sued for it.
What's I Am the Destroyer of Worlds?
It's almost all on YouTube.
I've seen the Harry Potter one. It's great.
Yeah, do you have that I Am the Destroyer of Worlds drop?
I no longer have it directly. I think it's just all under non sequitur now.
That's unfortunate.
I am Harry fucking Potter.
That's the part I wanted to hear.
Send me a link to that, Steve. Yeah. I have no idea what you were talking about. It sounds awesome, actually.
All right, so I'm going to just go on record again as stating that I am not racist, Steve.
Just all that about, like, I don't like Middle Eastern music, it's not catchy, is just, not racist.
Look, I'm just saying I don't like the general melodic scales used. Look, I don't like Norwegian black metal. And it's because the melody is shit.
Are you racist against white people, Greg?
I mean...
Oh, you're actually, you're just Jewish enough that that's really problematic for me to say. Now I'm being racist.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Is the remarkably sexist dribble spouted by... intentional, or is it just a horrible mistake?
It's a horrible mistake.
Please, God, move on.
What are we even talking about?
On.
We're talking about the battle theme from Final Fantasy VI. So now that we're moving past racism and sexism, what do you guys think about the song, guys?
Battle theme. I love this piece of music. All right, it's one of my favorites on this album.
Right. Well, Joe is less racist than I am.
Creepy rendition of a great battle song. I disagree with Greg on this. I love when they bring in a little bit of that Middle Eastern kind of stuff into Western music. Frankly, Metallica does it a lot. Megadeth does it a lot. Like my two favorite metal bands do it all the time. So I don't know. I love those kind of what is the scale they use? Is it Dorian? I don't freaking know. It's been forever since I've studied that stuff, but it's great. It's creepy sounding. I like how this one's like a heavy rendition of it. I love the choral part that they did here, like the chorusy stuff, and totally use this in one of my short films in high school. So much love.
And I do want to acknowledge real quick that I don't dislike all integration of Middle Eastern themes into Western music. It's just this one wasn't successful for me. Like Seduction of the Innocent from Carnival of Souls I liked quite a bit. Holy Wars, Megadeth, is a great incorporation of those themes in admittedly a slightly Spinal Tap-ish way, but they still did it really great. So I'm not against it completely, but I think as the melodic structure of this piece, it just doesn't work for me personally as a listener.
I believe what you're trying to say is it's not your personal musical background, so it's harder.
I'm just saying,
for you
as
to
a
get
slightly Jewish person, I am just. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, but you're from Cleveland.
Right, that's true.
You're 100% Cleveland, like 25% Jewish.
Ugh. You saying I'm 100% Cleveland really hurt my soul, but deep down I know it's true.
I know, I'm sorry. It was a mean thing to say, but, you know, the lulls.
That's fair. That is actually one of the, like, most hurtful things you've said to me in our entire friendship, and I'm, like, seriously, like... that's, like, a really good dig. Someone else talk. Damn it.
I didn't like that they slowed it down.
Versus the original?
Yeah, I'm not even a huge fan of the original, but like I love Final Fantasy VI, but I can kind of take or leave this battle theme. But I didn't like that they slowed it down. I liked how their synth horns sounded, though.
I thought the drums sounded fake on this one. They sounded very digitally crappy.
Spoilers. They were.
Well, I mean, yeah. I just didn't notice it much on the other songs, but this one, it really bothered me. This got the lowest score on my instrumentation criteria or whatever. But I did really like the bridge on this song. And I don't know, it felt pretty metal-y sounding. And that might have been that sort of Middle Eastern influence, possibly. I don't know.
All right, so Steve, you're not racist. How did you feel about this one?
No, this is, I
Just bleep this whole part out.
Greg's the one who ultimately edits it, so he could if he wants to.
Look, I am, first off, not going to edit this episode for a while because I'm busy doing a film score. Second, I'm not bothered to edit this.
Right. So I do enjoy this one. I rank this one second from the top, mostly just because between this and the other one that I liked, it felt a little bit basic to make this one number one. So that was what sort of settled the tie.
Hipster.
Like, no, I'm not picking the single as the number one. But no, yeah, I really like the song. Again, I like all of this album. These are fun heavy metal arrangements of video game songs, which is always something I enjoy listening to. I think this is the one I was most familiar with going into it, in that it was used in the most AMV hells. That and Maybe I'm a Lion. But we didn't do that album.
Nope. Well, any other comments on the battle theme from Final Fantasy VI before we move on? All right. Next up on the list, we have my number one song on the album coming smack dab in the middle of the ranking. We have Those Who Fight Further from Final Fantasy VII.
This one's good.
All right, I'll be the naysayer here. I like this piece of music. I like every piece of music on this freaking album except for the Seymour cymbals. But I love the rhythm guitar stuff here, and I like the original piece a lot. This version of it didn't really set me on fire. The guitar solos are bitchin'. The drums are pretty cool, but I don't know. I kind of walk away from this piece going, yeah, it's all right. It's all right. So
I agree
that's my take.
I agree the solos were really awesome. I wasn't insane about the guitar tones, but the solos themselves were awesome. The organs, I thought, like, that organ sound was really cool, and just the use of arpeggios was really interesting. It was like a, I don't know, really dynamic type of song. But to me, the downfall of the song was like the rhythm just kind of felt messy. I don't know if something was like slightly out of sync or if I just didn't quite, I don't know, vibe with it or something. But yeah, I don't know. This got the lowest score for the rhythm on my rhythm category. But yeah, it's a cool song. I still like the song.
Victor, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think this one is solid. This is kind of closer to what I wish the baseline quality of this album was. I feel like 7 and 8 in particular translate really well to what they're doing here. So I kind of actually wish there was maybe more from each of those games. But I think this one's solid, although I didn't have a lot to say about it in these notes.
All right, so now it's time for me to gush about this. So this was very difficult. There was the number 1 and 2 in my personal ranking were very, very close, and I went back and forth on them quite a bit. My number 2, spoilers, ended up winning this ranking, and so I'll talk about that when we get to it. This piece in particular, in terms of composition, I think is one of the strongest things Nobuo Uematsu has ever done. I will say, without hesitation, the guitar riff at the beginning of this song is one of the greatest guitar riffs of all time. And yes, it is a troll.
Oh.
The original version of this guitar riff is just a MIDI guitar. But I think that riff is as potent and powerful as anything by AC/DC, anything from Kiss, anything from Metallica. I think it is that good. I understand I am the minority in that opinion. Yes, I'm saying that riff is a classic riff. I think it is an amazing riff.
It was great in Doom.
Yeah, it was great in Doom. But I think, like, in terms of just the composition of it, especially, the way that the different moving parts are working in the song and the use of counter melody is absolutely brilliant in that the way it's building tension and like moving back and forth between desperation and heroism, really giving you that great back and forth dynamic, building as a piece, reaching these large emotional crescendos. I probably listen to a lot more. Actually, I don't know necessarily, but I feel like I probably listen to more 70s prog rock bands than most of the panelists, just because it's not very trendy amongst millennials to be listening to a ton of Yes and, Deep Purple, that kind of stuff. So I'm very familiar with the musical influences that were brought in to make this piece. And so it sounds like sort of a mixture of Van Halen and Deep Purple, but with the melodic sensibilities of John Williams. And so when you combine all of those things together, I think you get just a phenomenal composition. And I will acknowledge that this version is not as good as the MIDI original in that the guitar solo, while good, doesn't flow with the rest of the piece. It hurts the composition a little bit, but because the original core of the writing is so strong, despite my minor gripes with some of the arrangement choices not making it shine as much as it could, just the way that piece was composed, then the different parts and how well everything goes together, especially like once I started to notice the different counter melodies and how they work together and building tension, it's like musically absolute genius and kind of mind-blowing that he was able to make everything work in such a way where it's akin to the Beatles song Help, with the brilliance of the counter melody working together to make it that much more epic. It's truly just a phenomenal composition. It's not the composition I have the most emotional attachment to. That's actually what will end up being number 1. So I have more nostalgia for the number 1 than for this song, but just the writing is so damn good, I had to put it at number 1 just because of how great the composition was. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
It's good.
Enough said.
I like the original version.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say make snarky jokes, so if you got something meaningful to say, I cede the floor.
I just said I love the original. I was just, this version, I don't know. But go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, make your joke.
I was going to say I should have ranked this one higher than I did because this is the one that has an Amanda Lepre / Professor Shy Guy defunct side project named after it.
There you go.
Just the world needs more of those. speaking of heavy metal that sounds like video games, Amanda Labrie.
All right, yeah.
She plays for Andrew WK now.
Hey, that's a good gig.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think she's doing much solo stuff just because she's getting paid to play for Andrew WK.
Once again, a good gig. All of our friends have better gigs than we do. Like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just playing arenas with Ace Frehley in Europe. Oh yeah, I'm playing with Accept. Oh yeah, I'm playing with Andrew WK. What are you guys doing?
Podcast?
We're doing a podcast.
a couple of white dudes with some microphones doing a podcast.
Yeah. All right, so
isn't that the joke,
that is
right? What do you call a group
the scientific?
Yeah, like what do you call a bunch of crows? A murder? What do you call a couple of white dudes? A podcast?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
So, next up on the list, we have Force Your Way from Final Fantasy VIII.
This one bangs.
Yes, absolute banger. I agree. I think that I think the 8 soundtrack is underrated by Joe. I think, look, just because the Estar theme is bad, it doesn't mean the rest of the soundtrack is bad. And just because a couple lines in the translation of "Eyes on Me" is bad, doesn't mean the composition is bad. In my opinion. So I think.
Oh no. Look, I love Faye Wong. She's a good actress. She's a good singer. That song is atrocious.
I think if it just that first line was translated better instead of "whenever sang my song." Yes, that is a terrible translation. Absolutely. But if it was "when I would sing my songs," if you just change that one line, I think it would just work much better. And I think the melody in that piece is very strong.
I don't know, man. Honestly, like the tone of that song, I don't mind the melody on that piece when it's played on a
piano.
Like a piano. It sounds good, actually. There's a bit in Final Fantasy VIII where it's played on a piano, and I think it's the hotel part. But as a song, like with that orchestration on it, and with that just like cheese just going through the cheese grater, it's over the top love song kind of thing with bad lyrics, with a Chinese singer singing English. It's all just like bad. It doesn't sound good. I can't any part of that song, even if the stupid lyrics were fixed, I can't deal with it. That song makes me sick to my stomach when I hear it. It's so like I have a visceral physical reaction to that song. When I first heard that song played in the spaceship scene in Final Fantasy VIII, I was into the game, man. I was into these characters, and you could not have picked a worse thing to do. And you know what? There was one guy on the internet who totally had the exact same reaction of me. I think it was one of the guys from
it's your host, it's your co-host Caleb Schweiss,
and Caleb Schweiss. But there was a guy from the band Psycho Stick, I believe, has a blog. I was reading his Final Fantasy VIII blog thing, and he was talking about how his reaction to when that scene came up, and I was like, that's the exact same thing. This song is terrible.
Sure, I have to invite him on the next podcast then.
Oh God, fuck. Oh, I think the website I used to go on it all the time. It's Pluh.com. It's Pluh.
Yeah, no, I remember he was doing
Psycho Stick song.
He was doing Let's Plays of Final Fantasy 1. I remember maybe a year ago. So yeah, I remember that the guy was a fan of the series.
Oh, as a fan of Psycho Stick, by the way, separately found the song Beer is Good and found Final Fantasy VIII and found out that there was a connection there. That was a good moment.
Yeah, I think Minimum Rage is one of the best songs for anyone who has ever worked a crappy job. Just brilliant piece of music.
Piece of shit or 2 Ton Paperweight, I think is what the song is called. That song's amazing because it's exactly what having a shitty car is like. But
so interesting, we haven't actually talked about this piece yet. We've talked about a whole bunch of other different songs than this.
Yeah, okay. Final Fantasy VIII's music. Sorry guys, I got a Final Fantasy podcast. I got a little bit of a rant on this. Final Fantasy VIII's music.
He hasn't talked about this enough on his show for 5 years.
I feel like the tone that he uses in his MIDI scoring of the original game I don't think they are like it's. I think the instrumentations drive me nuts because I hear good melodies in there, but it's just like the tone he uses. I don't have this problem with 9, and I don't have it with 7. I only have it with 8. Like his little like rock organ thing, I don't like its use in Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack, especially in this song. And it would drive me nuts when because in Final Fantasy VIII, you got to draw from enemies. You got to draw like 100 at a time. Before I knew there was like an auto thing on the on the command thing, I would like manually go over and like do this like this draw function in the game, and listening to that song over and over again.
This isn't the one. This is the boss theme. This isn't the main battle theme.
A boss theme? Oh, okay. Well, either way, it's a song. I recognize it as a song I've heard about 1 million times that I'm not that big of a fan of the original from. This one has a lot of organ as well. I like the changes to Force Your Way. I like the rhythm guitar changes. Adds a lot to the track. The bridge is very cool. I'm not a fan of the original arrangement, so this version was actually a really nice surprise for me. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the original Final Fantasy VIII score, unlike most Final Fantasy fans. I realize I'm in the minority here. Sorry, done.
It's a cool song. I agree that the bridge is amazing. It's a really cool like change of pace from the song. And I love the main part of this song, but I feel like some parts of it get a little bit into that cheesy zone, like where it's so heroic, where it's like, you know, a little bit too straight, I think, and it gets a little cheesy. But yeah, I like the organ. I agree with that being really cool. And I got a little bit of like an Avenged Sevenfold type of vibe from the guitars on this one. Like, yeah, it's a good song. It's not bad.
So I'm actually playing 8 right now, and I'm not very far. So there is that caveat. But
so you have that
honestly,
song to look forward to.
No, so far I have not heard a piece of music that I didn't like.
Oh, I immediately there's the bum 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 bum.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that.
That's
too.
one of my favorite. Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
But like,
it's
okay,
so good.
But Joe, you don't like Fisherman's Horizon, do you?
Other arrangements are okay. I don't like the.
I've heard you speak very negatively about that one. Meanwhile, I go on Final Fantasy message boards, Facebook groups, and other YouTube videos like, yes, this is one of the highlights of the series, Fisherman's Horizon, one of the best pieces. So
yeah, worst parts of that game though. So I don't know if it.
So I think the trick is, I think 8. Talking mainly about a game that Steve hasn't played, so he's bored out of his mind right now.
Well, I got distracted by the Final Fantasy, the Psycho Stick Final Fantasy webcomic.
Oh yeah, that thing's great.
Even go look for more butts.
I already found all the butts I'm interested in.
That's fair.
I'm also I'm just racking my brain about the math of this. That I'm noticing that there are far too many songs in my own ranking that got as many points as the number of game they were. Like, whoa. I gave this song 8 points, and I gave the one from Final Fantasy 7 points, and there's another one coming up. And Greg, did you do that on purpose?
No, I really didn't. I just
in retrospect, I probably should have just rolled with that. Be like, if just match them to the game.
All right. Well, there you go. I think that
except the fact I would have had to give fight with Seymour 10 points.
You're right. Well, aside from the ones you legitimately ranked,
right?
So, and you did give a song legitimately 10 points. So what I would say with the soundtrack of 8, or 8 overall, it's a bunch of really good components where I think the visual design is great. I think the music is great. I think the side quests are great. I think the battle mechanics are great. And the fact that you can just play the game as a boss rush if you know what you're doing makes it a very streamlined Final Fantasy that eliminates grinding. If you know how to draw properly, and you don't have to spend hours drawing enemies, you just have to get some tents and turn those into Curagas, and then you can coast until you can get to draw points later on. So you don't need to spend those hours grinding enemies. That's a very inefficient way of drawing in Final Fantasy VIII. So the fact that you can play this game in a snappy fashion is great. The problem is the characters aren't very good and the story's not very good up until basically the end of Disc 3. is when it gets ridiculously awesome. The Eyes on Me scene I actually thought was very emotional and touching. So take that for what it's worth. But
Oh, great.
I'll actually disagree on the characters. I'm enjoying them so far, and I know people hate Laguna, but I think
he's great. Laguna's awesome. So I don't think that Laguna is bad. It's just I think the characters ultimately lack depth by the time you get to the end of the story, where everyone's sort of a little bit one-dimensional. Like once you know who they are, that's just about it. It's
my romantic dream. Yeah.
I mean, he's using it in a different way. You know, there's more than one dictionary definition of that. Joe, romantic.
I know.
Did you know that?
Part of that scene that he chose that word.
I think it's fine because he's trying to be poetic and trying to be medievally.
To be medievally.
Yeah, medievally. With MIDI soundtracks and whatnot. But I think the battle themes in 8 are phenomenal. I think they're like exactly what I want from battle themes. Great composition, great build. Love the bridge. I think the guitars in this one are ones that carry the melody among the best on the album. I don't think it's as good as the original. I think some of the melody gets lost in the overall piece, but when it gets to the bridge and the guitars kick in, fantastic. Love it.
Greg, I have I want to talk about Eyes on Me some more. So if anybody,
I mean, really, just need to
force your way real quick before I have a little bit of a tirade. Go ahead.
I will say this: we just eventually need to just do an episode where we rank the vocal themes from the games.
That's a great idea.
Get one of the Psycho Stick guys on for that. I'm in there.
I'll ask them. I mean, the thing is, you would be surprised how easy it is to reach people you're a fan of if you just tell them you have a podcast and want them on as a guest. They're like, fuck yeah, I'll do it. That's how I got all you nerds over here.
Yep.
You've been bamboozled.
You've been bamboozled. I tricked you into being my friend because I liked your podcast.
Eyes on Me. Greg.
I had one last thing to say about it.
Go ahead.
It's quick. This is one of the few tracks on the album that felt like they were actually having fun playing it instead of just transcribing it literally from the original music. That's all.
That's good. That's a good thing. Hey, Greg. Okay. So here's the thing. I'm deeply opposed to songs. And I'll say movies here, but it includes cutscenes to video games. Songs in movies that are on the nose with lyrics played in the background of emotional scenes. Those things drive me absolutely nuts. My least favorite one is like the end of Prince Caspian, the Disney Prince Caspian movie. There's just a song in there that makes me want to it made me want to blow my brains out.
This is the most recent one.
Movie. And then the Eyes on Me song being played during like a love scene. It was just like, could we not? Thank you to all movie people out there. Could we not put songs that are on the nose that underline what we're already watching and distract us with lyrics?
So,
thank you.
I respect that. For me, Eyes on Me wasn't distracting because it was a pop song in their world that was a hit. And you heard the motif throughout the game enough where it sort of felt like an emotional climax. So it didn't seem as out of nowhere. To me, it felt like it fit in within the score, within the context of the story, and as like a popular love song where when, a couple hears a popular love song that they've both been a fan of for years, and they resonate with it, that can be a very sincere emotional reaction. I've had that happen in my life where I've listened to a song that both my wife and I are a fan of, and when it comes on at like an emotional moment in our lives, it resonates with us deeper. And so I do it now is that it can be done in a very cheesy way. And for you and a whole lot of other Final Fantasy fans, the Eyes on Me scene was cheesy. I've heard a lot of people complain about that scene. I've heard a lot of people give it praise. It's very divisive. And so I acknowledge that that does not work for everybody. It's, it's not like the Beatles, where most people are just like, yeah, the Beatles are fucking sick, and then you get the couple outliers who are like, it sucks. I acknowledge that as divisive. I acknowledge that it's not for everybody. It personally worked for me and my sensibilities. But a lot of that is based upon how I interpreted the score and, my personal experiences of having moments like that in my life where a song resonated with me. I haven't seen Captain Marvel yet, but apparently there is some very awkward use of overly 90s songs that are very on the nose in the movie that pretty much everyone I've heard talk about it said it was cringeworthy and terrible. And I'm probably going to think it's cringeworthy and terrible when I get around to watching it. So I get it. I get why it doesn't work for you, but it worked for me.
I'm on Wikipedia reading about the song, and I am amused by the fact that it won an award in Japan for Best Western Song. They were like, this song is so American and so good, we're going to give it an award.
Yeah, I mean, look, China is west of Japan.
It's true. The B-side is the song Red Beans.
So,
Man, they should have done that on this album.
It would have been great.
They should have covered Red Beans, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, any other comments on Force Your Way, or Eyes on Me, or Final Fantasy VIII before we move on?
I think it's fun.
Which of those three? All of them?
The game. I just got Irvine, so I'm not very far, but I think it's a good time.
And, I think Final Fantasy VIII is... So here's the trick, is it might be lower ranked for maybe the series overall, but it's one of the best video games ever made. Like, on a mechanics level. Like, the draw system, once you figure it out, if you know what you're doing, you can beat that game very quickly and very efficiently. So,
because that's what we all play Final Fantasy games for. Just to beat them as fast as possible.
Well, no,
Watch the numbers go up, and then
that's what Joe plays them for.
I'm here to get scores.
Well, no, it gives you the option to play the game as a boss rush. Boss rush, if you want. You can skip the random battles, focus on exploring, focus on side content, or you can, add the battles in if you want. Like, it gives you basically control over how you play the game.
FF8's interesting because it's got so many high highs, but then it has so many low lows. So honestly, I think that's kind of like the quality of the game is all over the place, and I think depending on just kind of how you see things is kind of how your experience with that game is going to be.
I mean, I think it's one of the worst stories in the series by a wide margin, and I have a lot of critiques with it, but I think as a video game, in terms of like where its graphics were for the time it was released, the quality of the music, the optional side content, the exploration. It is absolutely a top-notch game.
As a fan of melodrama, anything featuring a dramatic sword fight where somebody explodes into birds at the end is cool by my book.
There you go.
There you go.
So, all right. Are we ready to move on?
All right, I'm done talking about this great song.
That's true. It's great. All right, so next up on the list, we are third from the top with something I ranked fourth from the bottom. We've got Dancing Mad next on the list.
Joe,
Yeah.
good choice.
It's a great piece of music, man.
Victor, I'll let you slide.
This is the most proggiest of proggy things here. Love all the crazy places that this piece goes in the original and this version and the Distant Worlds version, which is another kind of Final Fantasy album remix kind of thing. It's great. I wish it had a better chorus tone at the beginning. That's kind of one of those things where where versions of the song are better. They're kind of better with the epicness of it. But otherwise, like, this is just a great piece of music, and I like this rendition. Although I don't think it's quite the best one, but I'm not sure which the best one is. So I don't know. I'll have to listen to all of them in a row and figure out which.
Rank the Dancing Mads next episode.
And
Steve will remember what it sounds like.
even within the song, I feel like it's actually secretly 5 or 6 different songs that just like were too short, and they just kind of mushed them all together. I kept thinking it had switched to the next song, and it was still Dancing Mad. I'm just on minute 10 of 12 or whatever. It was crazy. It's such a long song, and it changes so drastically without much of a connection to the other bits.
Well, it's because it's the final boss theme for Final Fantasy VI, and the final boss has 4 stages. So that's why it has all those different things.
I just feel like I would have broken it up a little for this album, maybe into different tracks, or just picked one of the different, stages or whatever.
Have you played Final Fantasy VI, Andrew?
I haven't beaten it, so I haven't seen that final boss battle.
Yeah, so
It's fucking epic.
what I will say is, as someone who is more like in the middle of Final Fantasy VI, where I don't think it's the best game in the series, and I don't think it's trash. I think it's like, high mids for the series. I think it does some things very well, does some things not as well. I would say it is a great piece of music, but honestly, it took me a long time to get into this piece.
Because you got 12 minutes.
Right, you have 12 minutes. I think the original was 22 minutes. So
they got better at the boss fight, you're saying?
Yeah, they got better at the boss fight. Actually, I appreciate this version because it's shorter and just kind of gets to the point more quickly than the original version. There's a lot of really good moving parts in this, and I think the way that I look at this piece is more akin to a symphony composition than necessarily a traditional video game composition. Final Fantasy VI has the very famous opera scene and such in the game, and I think Uematsu was taking his score to new levels of ambition in terms of the length of the compositions, the complexity. And so what you have here is something with, different movements, which is something much more commonly found in traditional symphony music. I was in a symphony orchestra when I was in high school. So the structure of it is very familiar to me. The original version, I thought, went on a little bit too long, and the sections didn't grab me melodically with the instrumentation on the Super Nintendo. But the instrumentation here worked for me in that it made it stick out more melodically. But also, it didn't really sound like a rock song until 10 minutes into it when you got to the guitar solo. So it was just very awkward in terms of its placement on the album, even though you had Genova earlier on, which is more of a disco thing. This just sounded like MIDI music that was better than a Super Nintendo, but not good enough to be on the rest of the CD. But yeah. I think it's a well-written piece. It's done well, but it does not fit in with the album at all. It's a great final boss theme. I do enjoy it. I think it's very good, but I think there are better written pieces on the same album. I think the complexity of the piece and the fact that it's a good piece is why people praise it. But I think it gets extra praise for its complexity and not just based upon its quality, in my opinion.
And
that's why I liked it. Sorry.
I really liked the first third of it, but it just kept going for so long.
How Steve feels about these JRPG soundtracks. It's still going.
And at least this only has the 10 songs as opposed to Chrono Trigger or something where it's you have to talk about so many different, you guys would, for ranking that, went through a lot of work. Whereas this was pretty simple. Just this one song didn't really seem to fit on the album to me. Although I did like a lot of the instrumentation and stuff. It was just I don't know. There's a lot. You go through a lot with this. It feels like you're actually playing a video game. I don't know. It just kind of dragged on for me.
That's the worst summary of playing video games I've ever heard. It feels like playing a video game just drags on.
Look, JRPGs aren't fun. We all know they aren't fun. We're there because we're like, man, the story is supposed to move me emotionally. And oh shit, I've already played 6 of these Final Fantasies. Now I just got to complete all of them because I'm a completionist. Damn it. Only half of them are good.
I just mean where it's whether you like the song or not, you're going to hear it 100 more times over the next 5 hours. I don't know.
No, not this one.
No, yeah, I guess you're right. Not this one.
This one is I need to beat this boss so I can stop listening to this fucking song.
I don't know. I think this one rules. No,
it's good. I'm being a troll largely.
in my notes here, I say I could see someone who's not familiar or not a fan of the game not being into it. But for me, it's it's the absolute it's the perfect ending to this game that I think is basically perfect. Well, maybe not perfect, but it's my favorite Final Fantasy. So it rules. This is, I would agree, not my favorite version of this song. I would take the original one, from the game, or even the overclocked remix version over this. But I got to give it up for one of my favorite boss themes of all time.
Do we have any other comments on Dancing Mad before we move on? Steve, you ranked this as your number
talking
one.
about this iconic song.
Yeah, I ranked this as number one, largely because this is the most distinct of the songs. This is the one. So there were a couple spots.
Yeah,
where I was
because it's long.
Okay, this one's starting to drag a little bit, but this one had the most like interesting changes and the most variety to things. Like everything else is a little bit of the same sort of idea of just like a metal version of the Final Fantasy song, whereas this is the one that, you know, has the most variety to it. Is the most new thing you hear on this once you've heard the first two songs.
That's very true. It just stood out like a sore thumb for me. Like I was kind of, grooving and like enjoying the album until every time Dancing Mad came up, I'm like, oh, this thing doesn't belong here. Like it should be, critiqued on its own merits as a separate piece. It doesn't flow with the album whatsoever. Even Genova, I think, flows better than this because at least that's like what I would consider a single track of music. I don't know.
You know what I'd compare it to? It's like Hemispheres by Rush. Like this is the super long, indulgent track, but you know what? Limelight's just better.
Somewhere between Hemispheres and Thick as a Brick.
Yes, somewhere in between.
Sorry, did you say that there was a song that are you suggesting that other songs by Rush aren't self-indulgent?
Some of them are barely self-indulgent at all.
Yeah, some of them are just like, here's a pop song.
Working Man is just like, I go to a job and I come home and drink beer. I'm a working man.
I mean, it's got a self-indulgent guitar, so it's like a 5-minute solo, dude.
I mean, it's a little self-indulgent.
But no, Limelight, I would say, is not very self-indulgent. Their singles, like Subdivisions, like their pop singles are not very self-indulgent. They're just like, here's a catchy 4-minute pop song that we sold to radio.
The one I hear the most is Tom Sawyer, which is plenty self-indulgent.
Well, yes. I mean, Tom Sawyer is self-indulgent, but I don't think...
I mean, you really can't, talk about the brilliant ideas of the philosopher of our era, Ayn Rand, in a non-self-indulgent way.
That's true. The fact that Rush are Randroids is always something I, kind of forget about. And oh, yeah. But they're, Canadian Randroids, so they're super nice about it.
Right? They're like, capitalism is the best, but boy, this socialized medicine thing sure is pretty neat.
Hey, get some poutine. It's okay, we can eat a lot of it because our health insurance will take care of heart disease.
Hey-o. Also, things are very far apart, so it's a lot of walking. I'm told Neil Peart has actually mellowed a lot about that kind of thing.
Oh, he really has. I realize I could take this down a very dark road, so I'm going to just move on to the next track.
I don't know if he's mellowed about people calling him Neil Peart, but...
Oh, good plosive there, buddy. Yeah, you don't need a pop filter.
It's okay. Those are the ones that are going to Skype. The ones that are being recorded don't have the plosives.
Oh, there you go.
So only you guys get to... That's the advantage of being live in the studio with us, is you get to hear the plosives.
Live.
That's the Lipstick Generation guarantee.
The Lipstick Generation Podcast ASMR Hour.
Gross.
Welcome, everybody.
All right, I'm going to move on. So we're at the number 2 song on the ranking.
We don't have a drop for I'm done talking about Steve's creepy voice.
We can. All right, mark this down, Steve. I'm done talking about Steve's creepy voice. All right, next
song.
Next on the list, an iconic song from the series. We've got Clash on the Big Bridge,
which is from Final Fantasy V, and I gave it 5 points. Greg.
Whatever.
This wasn't number 1.
This was my number 2. That was pretty cool.
I mean, it's number 2 in the ranking, so that's a pretty respectable place for it. I would say out of all the battle themes, this is the one I think reappears in most of the games. You've got the prelude, you've got the main theme, you've got the Chocobo theme, and to a lesser extent, the Moogle theme. But of the different songs that have reappeared in the games, I think this is one of the highest ones because Gilgamesh is like, "What's up? Making another cameo. Hi, everybody." It's a very catchy, memorable song. I knew the song before I played 5. Was very familiar with just this as a composition. And so I didn't even get to Gilgamesh in 5 until, last year. So I've known this song for years and hadn't experienced it in its proper context until somewhat recently. But it's a great composition. maybe. Yeah, I know it's good. It's good. It's catchy. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I think I love this piece of music, and this version of it has a very good guitar tone. Really dug it. Sounds a bit like Def Leppard, in a good way. And love all the like guitar dual harmony kind of things. And the lead guitar work wins this one. So I'm a big fan of the guitar work on this song.
I
like it a lot.
I got some sort of Dragon Force vibes from that guitar in this song, which is a good thing. Like, there's that sort of fantasy, like, up-tempo. I don't know. It's a good comparison for a Final Fantasy, like, metal album. I really love the melody on this one, too, but I don't have that much to say about it. It's just really cool bridge, nice guitar tones. Boom.
I would say this sort of reminds me of the F-Zero soundtracks, the more recent ones. Just in terms of the production and style, this feels like it would fit in very well in an F-Zero game if it was just a little bit faster.
This song rules, and this version is quite good. And similar to Greg, I hadn't played or beaten Final Fantasy V until last year. And A, it's way better than its reputation would have you believe. And B, this song rules and this section from the game rules.
Oh yeah, it does. It really does.
And yeah, this I'm not very hot on this album overall, but this one gets an official thumbs up from me.
Yeah, and as far as Final Fantasy V, like I had played the game as a preteen. Like I had played pretty much all of the first 10 games like before the age of 13. So I was very familiar with the series, but I hadn't beaten most of them until having a Final Fantasy Renaissance in recent life, where it's like, oh, I'm not gigging as much because we're recording and rebranding. Guess I've got some time to play some JRPGs.
Final Fantasy Renaissance was my favorite sub-series.
That sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that does actually sound very much like the sort of thing they would name a game.
Yeah.
It totally does.
It's
another
just like
another game for Joe to
minigame.
play.
I think Final Fantasy Renaissance sounds like their Metroidvania type game. And that would
be
make $1
pretty
million.
Right. Or
I don't think they wouldn't use like real English words like Renaissance, though. It'd be some made up.
It'd be like all
version.
the bullshit names like an 11, like Vanadil. That doesn't sound like bullshit.
Final Fantasy Renaissance.
Oh, that's it. That's it.
Final Fantasy Renaissance, Dude Kime.
Yeah.
Dude Kime 2, 13.
And the box art is just a picture of Renoa, but like kind of dressed as the Mona Lisa.
Everything about this sounds terrible and something like they would definitely do.
It would suck ass, but they would do it.
It's actually a tower defense game, guys.
Oh,
Oh, no.
All right.
I really hope they don't listen to our podcast, because when that game comes out,
They
we're
already
all going
made
to
it-
feel so
They
terrible.
already made a tower defense one, Steve. Joe played it.
Yeah.
I played. Literally a tower. Literally.
It's a first person shooter.
So wait, you're defending the tower? So does that
Yeah.
mean that you're God and they're the heroes who are coming to kill you?
He didn't play those games.
You're a princess, and you have a tower, and you got to keep building the tower up. And each floor has people that defend the tower. If they get to the top of the tower, you lose. And
Oh, sorry.
like they're like little Final Fantasy characters on the way up, not playable characters, but like the monsters and stuff. Very honestly, like a really fun game, but like crazy that's a final that's a game. It's just insane. But
So wait, you're building a tower full of monsters to stop who?
people.
Okay. So yeah, you are
dungeon.
the boss who turns out to be God and also the devil at the same time, who needs to be vanquished in order to bring peace back to the world.
Yeah, but you stop them from getting to the top of the tower.
Yeah, okay. So,
You're like a bad princess, and then at the end, of course, you have a change of heart.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
You're a bad princess. Final Fantasy Bad Princess doesn't sound like a game they would make.
No, instead it's Final Fantasy My Life as a Dark Lord.
Here's what it is. It's Final Fantasy X-3 Bad Princess. I know that game is already like pictured in your head, and you're.
They replace the battle system with a massage mechanic.
So it's also a sequel to Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball.
There's a massage mechanic in 10-2.
Is there really?
Yeah.
I thought it was all like dress-based combat.
There's a mini game.
So bad. All right, guys, I can't think about this anymore.
All right, so let's go with hey, we're at the number one song. Let's go through this ranking. Hey guys, heyo. From the bottom to the top. Battle Scene from Final Fantasy 1. Battle Scene from Final Fantasy 2. Fight with Seymour from Final Fantasy 10.
Should be called Battle with Seymour.
Whatever. Genova.
Battle with Genova.
From Final Fantasy 7.
EATFT.
Battle Theme from Final Fantasy 6. Those Who Fight Further from Final Fantasy 7.
Battle Further.
Yeah, further.
Force Your Way from Final Fantasy 8. Dancing Mad from Final Fantasy 6. Flash on the Big Bridge from Final Fantasy 5. But the best song on the self-titled Black Mage's debut album, according to this panel of experts and Steve's random chaotic votes.
Shop Theme.
Yes, the Shop Theme. Making a surprise comeback. Steve, play that beauty for us.
Oh no, I don't actually have it specifically mapped to anything. I just have an annoying category somewhere.
That's unfortunate.
Damn it.
Oh, I don't even have that anymore. Oh no.
Oh no. So the number one song on the album is actually The Decisive Battle from Final Fantasy. Actually, wait, hold on. It's Eyes on Me from Final Fantasy 8. In a surprise upset with a steel chair, knocking out the decisive battle. Eyes on Me. Taking the victory.
The Megadeth version.
Yeah, the Megadeth version of Eyes on Me. A shocking upset, but I mean, Dave Mustaine, man of many talents.
Dave Mustaine's Eyes on Shop Theme.
We're all wishing him a speedy recovery from cancer so he can continue making these awesome metal covers like Eyes on Me. Perhaps one of the best Megadeth song, if not the best Megadeth song.
Perhaps. One of the best. That's for sure. Oh, God.
But you know what? Let's talk about the decisive battle. We'll get to Eyes on Me in a moment about how great that is. But we'll talk about the number 2 song, Decisive Battle. Final Fantasy VI, a classic of the series. Who would like to go first in discussing this?
Greg, I'm noticing that you made me give this one 6 points. That's my observation.
It's really a coincidence.
Uh-huh.
A happy accident, just like my existence.
Oh.
Nobody wants to comment on that.
I'll go first because I have barely any notes on this one because I liked it so much. Thing is, like, the more you like it, you just go, wow, that was great.
Yeah.
Cool, move on.
Yeah, that's true.
So I put Pantera, ? Because of the guitars right at the beginning. Definitely had like a bit of a scooped sort of edge to it. And I really liked that. Say, fuck yeah, huge sounding, a great guitar tone, great harmonies, great piece of music, period.
Boom.
And those were my thoughts on Decisive Battle. It's great.
Andrew, you ranked this pretty high despite, so you've played 6 but didn't beat it?
Right. And I enjoyed it. I never got to the final boss fight with Kefka. Yeah. But yeah, this is a cool game. The driving fast guitars. I love the sounds and I love the tempo of the guitars and the rhythm was kind of like uplifting and really cool. I felt like they kept changing the effect pedals or the synthesizer sounds again. Like just the noises changed a lot through this one, but I didn't mind it as much as an earlier song. But yeah, it's an awesome song. I feel like it has enough variety. I was kind of, I don't know, expecting to see more often in this where they just kind of repeated the same thing over and over again because it's a video game soundtrack, which they tend to need to be flexible as far as the length. or just constantly looping. But on this, they would at least like mix up the sounds and the effect pedals, and it sounded really awesome. I love the song. It's great. I had it ranked for number 3, so I'm not mad with this one winning. I'm happy about that, actually.
So, Victor, you like Final Fantasy VI a lot. This is your favorite Final Fantasy. You rate this one more towards the middle. How do you feel about it winning this ranking?
I found that to be very interesting. I do like this. This is another one that I sort of wish was the baseline quality of this whole album. And I like that they don't just play the song verbatim. There's a couple of extrapolations on like some melodic stuff near the beginning, and like once it kind of loops around, they kind of do that again. So I like that they actually play around with this one. And I like this one a lot. It's very solid. I feel like it's a pretty good representative of what I wish this album was instead of what it is. So I guess I'm a little surprised it won, especially since on the last panel I was on, my 5th place also won that one. So that's a very easy way for me to start predicting what's going to win.
Whatever I think is most in the middle.
The middle rises to the top.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know if I had anything. I just needed to make another noise.
Oh, God.
I love that.
That's why I have a soundboard, just so if I'm like, I need to make sounds.
As Dumbledore ponders with his gigantic brain.
Oh, I feel better.
All right, so I ranked this at number 2, which might surprise some people because a lot of people just think, oh, Greg's a 6 hater and he just wants to be contrarian and rip on 6. And
There's 3 songs from 6. You can't hate them all.
And the thing is, 6 is one of the greatest video games of all time. It's, the Final Fantasy series just contains a bunch of what I consider to be some of the greatest games of all time. 6 is one of them. This is one of the best boss themes in the series. Quite possibly the best boss theme in the series. Definitely up there. I feel like this is a song that actually I think from the 6 soundtrack isn't talked about enough. I hear a lot of people talk about different pieces from the 6 soundtrack, including the main battle theme, Dancing Mad, the opera scene, and a whole bunch of other musical pieces. And I feel like this one gets lost in the shuffle on online discussions that I've seen. And I'm like, oh, you guys are forgetting to talk about what is by far the best piece of music from the game, which is this composition. I think it is... So the beginning of this version, where it has kind of that bluesy intro with the synth pad underneath it, is very tasteful and like very soft. And then when it kicks into the rocking section, you get pumped. Fantastic melody for what I would call the verse, and one of the most emotive, powerful choruses, or what I would call it, the additional section of any boss theme in the series. And so composition-wise, I think there are a couple battle themes in the series that I think are better. I think the main battle theme from 7 and the boss theme from 7 are better. But as far as pieces from the series that I have a visceral, emotional reaction to, this is probably number 1 for me in the entire series. It's going to get less jokey for a second, so I apologize for getting super serious and dark in advance. But as people know, I had a little bit of a rough childhood.
Yeah, just a touch. Yeah, a little bit of getting stabbed.
I love your jokes, by the way. Like, oh, Greg's going to talk about getting stabbed and raped. Time for me to laugh. But that's what friendship is.
Right. If I can't laugh at your terrible, terrible trauma, which continues to affect your life to this day, what can I laugh at?
That's fair. But... So, the thing is, the Final Fantasy games were one of the few sources of light in my childhood. A source of inspiration, a source of hope. And things like Dragon Ball and, like, Batman and other things, too, were just, like, the idea of heroism and taking on forces bigger than you to make the world better and to make, the lives of those around you better. It's something that resonated with me deeply. And so, when I was on a message board one time, I didn't realize I was living in an abusive household, but then just casually talking about my day, like, hey guys, here's what I did today. My friends on the message board said, oh, that's like totally fucked up and illegal, right? Like, you need to call the cops and like get out of that abusive situation. And so when you're surrounded by abuse, you get a little bit brainwashed and you don't realize the situation you're in until someone from the outside sort of shakes you and wakes you up. And so as soon as I realized the situation I was in, and yes, I am getting to a point as to how this relates to the song, I came up with a plan with my friends on getting my stepdad caught by the cops the next time he was abusive towards my family, where we had a code word where I would call them up. I would say the word paladin because I was a Final Fantasy nerd and I thought 4 was the shit, and everyone was supposed to come over to my house with weapons to hold him off until the cops came. And, you know, as a kid, I fantasized about finally defeating my stepdad, taking him down, and obtaining freedom for myself, and this was the song in my head. This was the battle theme for me achieving freedom in life, for achieving happiness, for taking on a villain. This was the song I associated with that plan as I strategized, figured out how I would use my weapon, which for me was just going to be a metal rod, and like how I would best use it, how the terrain of the house was set up so that we could best restrain him. This was the song in my head. Obviously, this doesn't have the same meaning for everyone else, because no, not all of you went through my specific experience. You know, it's kind of the magic of music. People have different experiences with different songs that aren't necessarily the composer's intent at all. But because I have that nostalgic feeling, and because I recognize just the sheer quality of the composition, I ranked it number 2. But even with my extreme nostalgia, I do acknowledge that, yeah, the battle themes from 7 are still, like, actual better pieces musically. But yeah, there's my rant on the decisive battle.
It sounds like it was a decisive battle of some sort, right?
I mean, look, I'm here.
Yeah.
I got away. I did okay.
Jeez, wow, man. That's like a real life boss battle
Yes.
setup right there. Like
That's why I
strategizing.
had a boss theme for it.
Yeah, dang.
Like, I did all the grinding, made sure my inventory was good, set up my party beforehand.
Stocked up on potions.
Oh, gee.
Greg, why do you have why do you have a pocket full of feathers right now? Oh, I got a plan.
In case one of you dies.
In case one of you dies, I've got a fucking feather. So
And
yeah,
that was the story of how Greg lost a childhood friend.
Oh, God.
yeah.
Hey,
So
I mean, that shows you the power of the internet, though, that you're just like casually on message boards and they're like, oh, let's get you out of there. Like, let's change your life. That's, dang, man. That's powerful.
yeah, and I think that's just, you know, it's sort of a mentality I've sort of taken throughout my entire life of just a bad situation rather than just letting it consume my life, being like, okay, how do I get out of this? So, you know, there was a time when I had to climb out of homelessness, you know, living in Cleveland in the winter without a place to stay, sleeping under a tree one night when I had no place to go, and just, you know, climbing out of poverty and not refusing to give up. So, like, that's just a core part of my being. And honestly, this is kind of a decisive song in a way where before that I was very defeatist, give up, kind of a depressed kid where just I assumed my life was going to be terrible for the rest of my life. But then when people told me you need to get out of the situation, like when I realized the situation I was in was wrong, it wasn't the way the world was supposed to be. Not everyone was going through that. When that clicked as this is not correct, this isn't the way it's supposed to be, I made the decision I am going to change it because it's not supposed to be like this.
Isn't what ultimately happened with that your mom caught wind of the plan and said, oh, shoot, this actually is a serious situation, and got you and your sister out of there?
What actually happened was she found out about the plan and didn't want to be in the midst of combat. It's like, you know what? I should probably, because she knew she wouldn't be able to stop me from it because she would be too busy getting hit. So she's like, you know what? I should probably just bounce before like this gets really chaotic. And it, you know, it didn't come to that, but we were ready. We practiced. We trained. Like, we did our grinding. We were ready to throw down.
Greg used elaborate heist scheme. It was tangentially effective.
Hey, it ended up working in the long run. It worked in an unexpected way where we didn't have to fight, but, you know, we were ready. And I am very confident, as someone who's been in a lot of fights in my life, the training that we did and how much better we got with our weapons, which, like, honestly, we were pretty fucking dangerous. Like, it would honestly be more difficult for us to not kill him. But we got good at it, and I got out of the situation. So hey, mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That needs to be an enemy in the next Final Fantasy. 10-year-old with a chunk of rebar.
Fucking mess you up, man.
I was gonna say you probably didn't have to train so hard if you guys had just played Triple Triad and refined some cards.
Right.
Stand back, Bernie. I have a blue eyes white dragon.
On a related note, so the Final Fantasy podcast, no one can know about this. Who couldn't make it today? They, on one of their recent episodes, said, don't just tell a friend about the show, tell an enemy. So I messaged my stepdad on Facebook and told him to listen to No One Can Know About This. He hasn't gotten back to me. But I did it for the lulz, guys. I found him. I'm like, oh, this is the man who should be in prison for a number of crimes. All right, I've got a good joke. The things I do for the lulz.
Wow.
Do you give him a time code too? Or?
No, I just said, like, hey, you should check out this Final Fantasy podcast. They told me to tell an enemy, and you were the first one I thought of.
Wow. I have still not listened to a single episode of that show, by the way.
I mean, it feels weird telling, like, my friend who hosts a Final Fantasy podcast about how great this other Final Fantasy podcast is, but...
Right, he's so used to telling enemies, he feels uncomfortable telling friends.
It's so weird for me to tell my friends about this show, like, because I'm used to telling mortal enemies who, like, I battled for years of my childhood and affected all these psychological scars.
Quick, call Greg an asshole so he can tell you about the podcast.
Right. But yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay. I'm glad it's good. A lot of people have told me it's good. I'm glad there's going to be another show out there to beat us, I guess.
Some big shoes to fill.
The thing is, I think that their show... I don't think there's any way they can actually go through the entire series, like its main series only with those guys. Because the way their show is set up, like, they're going to be playing Final Fantasy VII for, like, a year of the show.
Jeez.
So, like...
You got 46 years ahead of them.
Right, so there's just like, they're gonna stop giving a shit at a certain point. Like, there's no way they're gonna be, like, into their 80s being like, fuck yeah, Crystal Chronicles, man. Like, that's just not happening.
They will not say fuck yeah, I promise. And it has nothing to do with them being in their 80s. It has to do with that game.
If you told me there was an octogenarian who was, cussing out Final Fantasy games online, I would check it out.
That does sound fun.
Playing some fucking Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles over here.
It's multiplayer, man.
You kids these days with your immersive virtual reality experiences. Back in my day, we had to hold a controller, and it was sharp and pointy.
Oh my god.
See, by the time they play Crystal Chronicles, they'll have a VR remake. And, you'll be playing through the game. VR will be so good that, like, you'll be able to have smells in the game, and you'll, like, have trouble breathing and keep complaining about, my asthma!
These sprites are giving me motion sickness.
So, yeah, they're not going to finish
This all
the whole
sounds
series.
amazing. I really want to listen to this. I'm excited for No One Can Know About this, 60-year anniversary.
Yeah, that's going to be a really, really great...
Some great pod.
Some great pod, because podcasts will still be a relevant form of entertainment then, I'm sure.
I mean, they'll be virtual reality.
Right.
We'll get to, be in the room watching them play the game in virtual reality.
Like, wow, someday in the future in VR, I can see a couple of nerds playing Final Fantasy. It's like I'm in the room watching a
nerd play a video game.
Think about the future. It looks bright, guys. Automation might destroy 20 million jobs, but we'll have VR watching people play video games at least.
Universal Basic Famicom.
So yeah, that's our ranking.
Tremendously different from, at least for me, it was going to people's houses and watching them play video games.
Right, yeah. In the future, you can just watch people's video games. Actually, you can already watch people's play video games from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, but you're not actually there, man.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, you're not there smelling the mac and cheese and sloppy joes and those dishes full of ranch dressing from chicken wings that they left out for 2 days.
I can't wait for space Doritos.
Hearing their mom yell at them or something.
The mountain in Mountain Dew is Olympus Mons now, suckers. Also, they somehow found a way to remove more vowels from it.
So yeah, decisive battle. Any other comments?
They removed another vowel? I'm so confused. What?
Mint and Dew?
From Mint Dew?
Mountain Dew only has one
It's
E.
just EW now, or what?
Yeah, I guess it probably would be. Mint Dew.
All right. Look.
Man, Caleb sure missed out on this episode.
It did.
So yeah, that's our ranking. Were you guys happy with it? Surprised by it? Anyone have strong opinions on the ranking?
I think overall this is just a fun remix album. I don't think it's going to create any like super strong opinions out there. Certainly, it is good drone on programmer music. So it's a good album, and the rankings I don't think they're going to matter that much. I think they're like, I don't know. There's not that much differentiating each song that it's the opinions are honestly that strong on this panel.
Right.
So, because, it's just overall, it stays pretty consistent. So, I don't know. I like the album a lot. But, no strong opinions about it.
Yeah, this is a very swingy episode, so there wasn't a lot of consensus on this one. It was very all over the place in the rankings, and I think that's because a lot of it falls to sort of the same level of quality. And so, like, the same way where I had to have, like, kind of bullshit reasons to rank the Gojira songs, like, oh, this is all the same quality, bad.
Same
oh,
quality,
this is all the
great.
same quality, great. There's a Kiss album like that, which a lot of fans consider to be their best album or one of their best. And a lot of those songs fall into the same sonic space, where it's like, they wrote 2 songs for this album, and both those songs are good, but then they just did it 10 times, and that's the album. But it just ends up being their best one. So, kind of the same situation here, where just a lot of them are so similar in quality, hard to rank. In my rankings were mostly based on the original composition, but with consideration taken to, how the arrangement affected this particular version.
Yeah, I agreed with like pretty much everything you guys said, except my rankings were different. But like the descriptions were all totally valid, and like I agree completely. It's just it's kind of up to personal preference how you rank the songs. But yeah,
The words you said are correct, but the numbers are different.
precisely.
This is going to sound rich coming from a guy who makes music in his bedroom, but I'm not a huge fan of the soloing over loops genre. But I think...
You know what? You have no idea how much I fucking respect you, dude. Like, you have no idea how much I respect you. Just, sorry, continue.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the first time that I listened through this album, it was kind of a drag. And the more I listened to it, I was sort of able to tap into the coder mentality. Not that I was ever coding while doing this, but I sort of understood how it could fuel that sort of well, I have a lot of things to do, and if I don't just sit down and do them, they won't get done. And I want to only kind of enjoy this music that I'm listening to. This is almost a perfect album for that exact description.
Great background music.
On a really productive day, I will just suddenly wake up and realize that I've been fuging out and humming loudly to myself and wrote 300 lines of code. And I really hope that my cubicle mates all have their headphones on.
Yeah.
There's a podcasting friend of ours, Chris Sinzak from Decibel Geek Podcast, who's hosting the Rockin' Pod convention. And we were just one day just hanging out. It was the night that Gene Simmons was a dick to me. And we were hanging out before then. I didn't know I was going to meet Gene Simmons that night, so that was just a weird thing. But we were talking, and he was asked me, I never asked you what your favorite bands are. And I was listing them off, and he said, wow, you really like dramatic sounding music. You like your music to be big and bombastic. And, I hadn't really thought about it, but then I thought about, the bands I like, which is the Beatles, giant fucking pop hooks, Jim Steinman, over the top, bombastic,
And short jorts.
and short George. Oh, geez. Well, all right. Derailed. But Alice Cooper, Kiss, Thin Lizzy, all of these bands that had sort of like these larger than life songs, but just these massive, smack you in the face hooks. And for me, I think that's kind of my goal with music, is to have hooks that smack you in the face and force you to pay attention. It's why when I was first getting into bands in like the early 2000s, and I would go to live shows and like, why are all these songs the bands are playing not catchy? And I didn't even think about it in terms of not catchy, but I'm just like, why can't I sing along to this? Why is this not memorable? Because I, was listening to The Doors earlier, and The Doors are super memorable, but I can't remember anything these guys are doing, and I'm listening to it right now. And that sort of like developed my stance on how I want my songs to be written, how I view hooks, etc., etc. And so this album is interesting for me in a lot of ways, where the compositions are good, but the way they're performed are not allowing those hooks to shine. And so there are days where I love this album and I think it's great, and there are days where I'm lukewarm on it and it pisses me off. And so this is largely like what kind of mood I'm in. Depends on my interpretation of the album, but I think the playing's great. Tsuyoshi Sakito, as a musician, just continues to impress me. Like, the more I find out about his music, the more I respect him. Where even if I'm not necessarily a fan of the arrangements on this album, his playing is stellar. And I know he can arrange very well, and I know that what they did was very deliberate, probably so it could be like the kind of music you can put on in the background and just jam to. So I think it was done very deliberately. I think they succeeded with what they set out to do, but it's not necessarily what I would have wanted to have done with the material in this genre context.
I feel that exact same way, where like when I first heard about it, I was like, had a picture in my head of what it would be, which is a little bit maybe more dynamic and a little bit more like hardcore. But then what it actually is like, it's easy listening, it's enjoyable. I don't know, and it strikes me slightly different ways every time I listen to it. But I'm glad it exists. I'm glad we listened to it for this show.
Aww. We're glad you listened to it with us.
Right.
Sort of.
Aww.
Everyone's glad except Steve.
I mean, I enjoyed the
Yeah,
album.
he enjoyed it. He just didn't have much to say about it.
Right.
Well, that's our ranking. Excellent guess. Where can we find you on the internet, Victor?
Oh, hey, I am at the Victastic K on Twitter, and I have a SoundCloud, a Bandcamp, and I'm on Spotify and Patreon under the name James Gameboy. And Joe, I don't know if you used it in the episode yet, but I did a cover of the auction house theme from Final Fantasy VI in the style of Slipknot.
We found it. Yeah, we haven't put it on the episode yet. We got it. Thank you.
So it should be appearing in an episode of Ultima Final Fantasy in the relatively near future.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
how you close out the weekly show.
No, we're not gonna do that. But yeah, we'll be using it.
Yeah, Joe told me it was the most insane thing he'd ever heard, which was the biggest compliment I've ever received.
Yeah, it is insane. There are not that many words I can use to describe that thing, but I am glad that it happened. I was waiting for a long time. I was like, is it going to work on it?
Yeah, it really took me a long time to get around to it, but I finally did, and there it is, and I'm excited for everybody to hear it.
Tremendous. Speaking of Joe, hey, transition. Joe, where can people find you?
When it comes to Final Fantasy stuff, you can find me on the show Ultima Final Fantasy. And me and Caleb have been going through the games for a long time. We're about to wrap up our show. Looks like we'll be going for another month and a half, 2 months on the weekly show.
Which
and then
by the time this episode comes out, might be like the week after.
Yeah. Might be. We'll be going into what we call maintenance mode, which means we still have a list of games to play, but none of them are strictly called Final Fantasy. So whenever it's convenient for me and Schweiz to hop back onto the show and record, we will do that. We have been going nonstop. We have not missed a week. Sometimes the days during the week when we put out the episodes vary, but we have never missed a release.
By the way, I'm still waiting for this week's episode.
Yeah, we're recording that tonight. when Schweiss gets home from work. So
Day
yeah, that's how
jobs.
crazy things are. But yeah, so for 5 years we've been doing that, and that's we'll be eventually getting rid of our website too. So it's not going to be ultimatefinalfantasy.com, but you can just find us on whatever podcatcher that you're on. We'll keep it up, and our Patreon will be keeping up that feed as well. So the podcast, yeah, Ultimate Final Fantasy. I also have a Godzilla podcast that I'm on called the Godzilla Podcast, and that's my friend Drew and I going through the Godzilla series. And you can tweet me if you want at Joseph Degolier. That's Degolyer, and Joseph spelled the normal way. So you can come talk to me about Final Fantasy, Godzilla, or I love movies. So talk to me about movies.
Do we applaud Victor?
I did, but he got the sad, pathetic clap.
Oh,
Wow, that's brutal.
There. That's the makeup clap.
thank God.
So, Andrew, where can people find you on the internet?
Okay. Okay, so I do a podcast. It's a casual, all ages theme park design show, and I've had Greg and Joe on it in the past. Along with a ton of other great guests, but it's called Amusement Sparks. You can find it in your podcatcher or amusementsparks.com. If the website link isn't working, just Google Amusement Sparks. It'll come up. Or you can find us on YouTube at Kuyomi, Cuyyomi. That's the name of the channel. Thank you very much.
Oh, come on. Give me better.
I can't actually pick. It's the random number generator.
Everybody on this show is going to not to step on your clapping. Everybody on here has been on UFF. That's crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, except for Steve, but no, he guest hosted multiple episodes of that show.
Been on UFF multiple times. Crazy. All right. I had that thought when we started. Now I'm thinking about it again. I'm like, wow. Okay,
We just
all
think
right.
of this as a special secret episode of UFF.
Yeah.
Oh, turns out we missed a week. Here's us talk about the Black Mages.
Hey, you guys cool with me using this?
Yes. Actually, if you use this as a filler episode for UFF, it might come out before our version, but you know what? I'm cool with it.
Yeah, send me the file, please.
Yeah, we'll send you the file.
With the Final Fantasy X theme park, your episode, your uncut version came out before the real version, my version, I mean. So I don't know, it's kind of cool. You guys are good at getting the drop on the authentic edited
Yeah,
version.
we're good at going, oh shit, I don't think we have time to record this with her.
What we have already recorded.
I will say, if you're as far as using filler episodes, use our FF Legend 3 before using this one if you can. This is the break in case of emergency episode.
All right, perfect.
All right, and we're Lipstick Generation. Find us at lipstickgeneration.com. You can find podcasts, music. We just recorded a music video. Is it out by the time of this episode? I don't know, because I don't know when we're releasing this episode, because we record in advance. You know more about me than I do, future listeners. So we'll find out. If there's a music video, I don't know, go watch it. If there isn't, I don't know, listen to our albums. Buy a CD, maybe. Listen to a podcast. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much. Another great episode of Ultima Final Fantasy. Enjoy the grind.